of them as well. What a move from the 48. Oh, look at this, and onto the straight they come.
Brilliant move there from the number 40 to make it through. That left-hander sliding up the inside, going up now over Hawthorne Hill, down Pilgrim's Drop, and it's brilliant stuff here at Brands Hatch.
Your Monday night of sim racing action starts right here with us on RaceSpotTV as we get ourselves set and situated for the endurance round. Here today, 1 hour, 45 minutes, and a task the tale as old as time. Just win is the simple answer. Drive that hour and 45 minutes to the end as quick as possible. The Boomy Brigade has been in full force at the top of the championship. It's been nigh on impossible to stop him so far, but the two WSR boys of Ross McFarlane and Alexander Davidson, with a bit of help as well from Michael Ebb Docker, will be looking to try and make that chase. My name's Jake Sperry, bringing you all of the coverage. Here today alongside me is Nathan Richards for today's action, with Hugo Louise on director's chair for this. And Nathan, as we get ourselves set, qualifying just about to bring itself to a close, an hour 45, the first of two Enduros on the rounds for this season. And you have to say, this doesn't give much of the close quarters battle as we have. This is a true test of endurance. You've got to try and hold that ability to say, I can outlast everyone else.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the main things for this evening is more about consistency rather than that raw pace. Of course, we know there's lots of drivers on here that can put in some superb alien laps, but in this race, you've got an hour and 45 minutes. You've just got to be consistent, no making mistakes, no running wide, no running off track. So that is going to be the real test today. What can these drivers do, and can they keep themselves at top pace for the full near enough 2 hours?
and we will be seeing over the course of this season. We'll come back to Spa in 3 weeks' time and say 4 weeks' time, and say that's when the endurance, the second of the endurance races, are going to come into play. A lot of technicals here, 4 still between the end of the season at Indy, the Circuit de 24 Hours du Mans, at Circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia, and at Sonoma. But it's those features that prove to be important that are top and tailing this season. Gilles Villeneuve and Daytona. It's a stacked season card. And so as we go to the championship standings here for World GT Pro, James Boomey in control, 41 championship points clear over Alexander Davidson, with Ross McFarlane currently lined up in 3rd position currently. Michael Evdocker's going to have a lot of work behind him. Matthias Pirhanen for Altitude Frame is 5th, with Marley Joffe in 6th and Arthur Thurtle 7th. Dennis Grabowski moves up to 8th, and after a good showing last week, Anders Meyer will go to 9th for Racing Lab Esports. Harrison Crowther rounds out your top 10, as we've got the likes of Pro-Am, which is looking very interesting here, Nathan.
It certainly is, and of course Aidan Carter last season moving up from the AM category and already running away with this season on 537 points ahead of Phil Samways in 2nd on 484, and then things get close to Eric Muscar and William Guthrie in 3rd and 4th. There are only 10 points separated between those 3. Then we have Michael Gray running off the top 5 for Full Tilt Motorsport, followed by Hakon Edlinmo in P6, and then we have Tom Griffiths, Dickie Simnor and Andy Archer all within 20 points themselves, and then Tommy Vidal running off that top 10 on 347 points.
That will be an interesting scrap, and it has been a story of an AM who has been completely flying and might need a jump up a category. Daniel McCauley has been simply fantastic, with Ben Altria in 2nd position. Large gaps back to Brian Loynes, who's there in 3rd for Altitude Frame Esports Mr. Hedge. Franek Sikorsky having a dropout from the round 8 of the season will now fall back to 4th, with Jesse Payne-Wilkins and Joe Coffin tied on points. Paul Smith up there with consistency for Cracked Racing, they're in 7th, and Elliot Roberts and Jacques Eva are 8th and 9th. Ben Bennyworth rounds out the top 10 for Quarter Mass Motorsports. Now, Team Pro standings here, Nathan, look very much like 2 titans at the top.
Yeah, certainly. WSR and Altitude absolutely flying away with things, and we say that there's about 150 points separating the top 2, but then it's nearly 400 points going back to Altitude Esports by Sim Stickers in 3rd. They're around 100 ahead of Effect Simulations, only 20 points back to Racing Lab Esports in P5, and then once again 235 points back to Nomad in P6 ahead of Atomic Esports X DCW, and then we have Atomic Esports in 8th, very close to the back of Atomic Esports DCW, and then reigning off the top 9 on only 230 points. It's Soul Peck Precision Racing. They certainly have to try and get some good results in.
They're struggling with just one driver. Full Tilt V Motorsports in control of the team and standings, with Series 1 Racing just in the same bracket. Full Tilt Motorsports exactly 100 points behind, so they'll certainly chase on up, with Altitude Frame Esports, Mr. Hedge, and Project 91 Academy there in 5th position. You've got Boosted Motorsports in 6th, and that follows up with Effect Simulations Club Sport in 7th. And as we do, we'll look over to the starting grid for racing action, where Alexander Davidson has put the car on pole position in a critical must-get moment. Martin Toth is alongside for RaceGear EU by WSR, as Ross McFarlane goes from 3rd and Anders Meyer in 4th. Michael Evdocke will make that 3 WSR cars in a row in 5th, with Marley Joffe back this week here in P number 6. James Boomey a little bit out of sorts in qualifying. He did have the pole time on a 21.9, but a 201.9, but that was going to be a case of he still needed one more lap, as William Guthrie, the leading Pro-Am, goes alongside him in 8th. Matthias Pirhanen and Jack Osborne make up your top 10, with Tommy Vedel and Joe Newman making up the 6th row of the grid. Arthur Thurtle and Joey Petrig are in 13th and 14th, with Chris Chatterton starting 15th alongside Michael Gray for Full Tilt Motorsports in 16th. Eric Muxka and Adam Watson will have row 9 of the grid as David Mendonca and Josh Boot round out your top 20. Leading AM is the South African Jacques Eva, who had troubles last time out for Rhino Racing, looking to try and right those wrongs with Franek Sikorsky alongside the company. Aidan Carter and Andy Archer make it a case of the 2As there on row number 12. Phil Samways and Taylor Lane there for Nomad in 25th and 26th, with Louis Hesketh and Joe Coffin 27th and 28th. Elliot Roberts and Ben Altria are 29th and 30th, with Daniel McCauley just behind his nearest rival in the AM category championship. Adam Hedgecock will be going there in the Cowprint number 13 in 32nd position. Håkon Ida Lindmo will be in 33rd, with Benjamin Gregory in 34th in the brand new Aston Martin, with Howard Hassan and Ben Bennyworth for Quartermass Motorsports making up 36th. Paul Smith, good friend of ours here at RaceSpotTV, is 37th, with Tom Griggs in 38th as Lee Berridge and Byron Crawford make up the top 40. Brian Loynes will go from 41st, with the gentleman John Roberts in 42nd. Colin Sansom and Dennis Grabowski there, the first of the drivers not to set a time. These drivers will all be split by their I rating, so Jonathan Walker, Jesse Payne-Wilkins, Drew Fletcher and Oriel Duran make up the 48 drivers here today, looking to put this Enduro in the books. A look around what is today, Nathan, a very muggy and overcast day, all things told, and they will be looking around saying, what do we have to navigate through? A 21-degree track temperature. This is going to be all about getting brake temps early.
Yeah, certainly, and this will be a really tricky first 10 and 15 minutes, and that's kind of the worst time that you want to have to be kind of getting used to the conditions, because the drivers right now want to make it through those first 10-15 minutes unscathed, but when drivers are trying to adjust to the conditions, get into a rhythm, that makes it difficult when new things appear. So this will be a difficult start indeed, but I think one thing that is in the helping hand of James Boomey is the fact we have a long race. If he qualified 7th in our feature or technical formats, we'd be thinking, oh, he might be in a spot of bother. But with such a long race and the consistency that he has, this might not actually be that bad of a position for him, just working his way through the field. But everything here looks like it could be going towards Alexander Davidson, and with a 41-point gap in the championship, he realistically needs to be converting his pole into a win this evening.
Certainly does. There's a tailwind into turn number 1 here today. There's a headwind into turn number 5, so mark that how you will. It will also mean they'll have a headwind into Canada Corner, the 3 prime places to get overtakes done around this place today. The iRacing BMW safety car is about to pull over to the right-hand side. Pace in control of Alexander Davidson, knowing the likes of Martin Toth will be looking to stage hunt today. Ross McFarlane looking to provide adequate backup. The jump up the hill is there, the green flag underway, and put an hour and 45 on the clock, because we are starting here, and it's all about the drive towards turn number 1 as everybody finds themselves an angle onto the brakes and works out, can they carry the speed through the middle. Nice and clean for Alexander Davidson off of the front of the field. The likes of Toth hold third place now, with Anders Meyer up to 4th, as look at them all descend into turn 3.
Indeed, a great start here from our drivers. Nobody really getting into any sort of bother. Even saying that, there we go. 3, 4, 5 cars off the circuit heading through turn number 3. And I'm not sure who that was. I think it might have been Adam Watson. John Roberts involved. Eric Muxker as well, I think, involved in that one. And things didn't last very long, did they? Zev Doka jumps up into P4 ahead of Anders Meyer. And then Jack Osborne claiming that top 10 spot up into P2 for the Pro-Am category.
Yeah, doing a great job, and up through the Corvette Bridge section, now heading towards the Hurry Downs as this mid part of the lap is known. And Anders Meyer has gone around, and there's going to be huge dramas because he's caught another car in it, and that is the championship leader, James Boomey, who's in the middle of all of that.
Oh dear me, what a shame for James Boomey. And just as we said that, it might not be that bad of a situation down in P7, unfortunately. Ooh. That's his race over, and who's that? I think that's Adam Hedgecock, isn't it, in the 13?
Yeah, that's a big off there to have, heading into turn number 9 and the long carousel corner that immediately follows lap 1. Proving to have dramas then here in your World GT Championship, but it's all calm on the run at the front, because there's not much to say between the top 3. Docker and Marley Joffrey there, and there's more dramas back across the circuit, straight in the middle of the road. A huge accident then, but falls many in the middle.
Oh dear me, that's 3 or 4 cars off. as they all make their way through. What a shame, and I think that might be Ben Bennyworth involved as well, as Elliot Roberts has the meatball flag for repairs required onto his car as we all make our way through. And Paul Smith up into 32nd, I think started down in 37th, so a good start from our very own Paul Smith. But yeah, a very chaotic start indeed here, as here's Marley Joff looking to make the move ahead of Michael Evdoka as they head back down towards the first corner, and a nice move indeed, and into P4 for Marley Joff, who I've got to say has had a really good opening couple of minutes here, making a couple of moves off the start. Maybe he could be someone we could be looking at for a podium later on.
Like taking Toffee away there for Marley Joffy, easy as you like in terms of making that pass. You've got this secondary pack that's forming behind Tommy Vettel and Michael Gray at the moment. You've got likes of Chatterton, Carter, Boot, Sikorsky's in there, Phil Samways also part of the mix, and Sikorsky is currently your leading AM after the opening lap. On board with Josh Boot here, down into turn 5. It's one of the best places to get a move done, but if you can't get it done at 5, you can climb back up the hill and attack at Corvette Corner turn 6. Look at this gaggle that forms just behind as they work on through. Louis Hesketh at the front with Andy Archer, and look at how it goes. You got Ultra there, Taylor Lane, Dan McCauley, Jacques Eva and Tom Griggs, all three Pro-Am and AM all represented.
Certainly, and this is one thing I love about Road America. Literally every corner you can overtake, you can run side by side, so we do get some really good battles between our drivers, especially when you've got a mix of the pros, the pro-ams and the AMs all together. It makes for some really great racing, and we're going to get some brilliant overtakes as this race goes along. We are just about 5 minutes through, as that is somebody running wide as they head their way through, and that is not ideal. That's a number 23, so I'm not sure who that is, but that's someone near the back of the field.
Yeah, so that'll be the driver who was 23rd after the opening lap, Jacques Eva. You can tell by the number on their car, which is lit up in LED. That indicates when they cross the line and their transponder ticks them over, that's the position I was in. So that's a great way to tell who is who out there at the moment. And Jacques Eva had a great qualifying, but it looks like the start of this race has been a little bit more troublesome for Jacques, who's got to try and do a little bit more to try and gain up. Now, immediately into the pits will come Tom Griggs, and that I don't think is going to be what we call a scheduled stop for him, because it's too early in this one, because they're limited to 75% of the fuel tank. So either there's going to be a lot of fuel saving required, or he's going to be in for a 3-stop race, we reckon. And look at that into turn 1. Eva just about staying in position as it stands. So we'll take a look at some of the issues on the opening lap. Just the smallest tap, and Eric Muxka there, the Slovakian, going around and finding the concrete there on the outside. Not a barrier, concrete.
Indeed, and that was the worst place that you want to be caught up, as that was Adam Watson who lost the rear heading through turn 3, and of course collecting Eric Muxka in the process. Everybody else made it through quite nicely. Then of course further ahead, this was the contact between Anders Myra and James Boomy, and that is the last thing that James Boomy would want this evening. Currently down in 40th position after that contact on the start. This is... well, I mean, I don't think we've seen anything happen like this before for James Boomy, have we? Never really been in any sort of situation where he's had to fight through the field.
Well, we do have these reverse grid races that come up in technical and feature, which say we're going to put you that far back, but not by his own accord have we seen him there. Look, he tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. He just picked wrong, and he painted himself into a corner.
Yeah, and that is a big shame for James Boomy, but it really does help those, you know, who are also fighting in the championship, such as Alexander Davidson, Ross McFarlane, who I know is a little bit far back, but could still get involved, and that's what happens to Adam Hedgecock as well, heading into turn number 5.
Yeah, that was Benjamin Gregory, I think, who got caught up with it, and Elliot Roberts there having a huge moment. Look, cold tyres, lap 1, through the kink, try and hold it flat if you dare. It is very tough to do, but the one thing Elliot Roberts does horribly wrong there, gets to hold the brakes, comes back onto track.
Yeah, indeed, and of course that collected, I think, 3 or 4 cars in the process. So, a very hectic start, and I was honest, Jake, I didn't think we'd have that much of a chaotic start. I thought people would try and take it a little bit more conservative there, as that was John Roberts' view heading through, and I mean, that would have been a scary one indeed. Even though you're in a sim, that would still be quite frightening. Big shame there for John Roberts, and this would have been the POV from Brian Loins going through and luckily not actually coming away. That, as I say, that gets hit again.
Yeah, so easily done. Brian Loins thinks he's clear of it in the Ford Mustang, and it doesn't work. On the bottom of your screen, there was going to be a battle as Jesse Payne-Wilkins had troubles. Martin Toth just lost third. Now to Marley Joffe. Jesse Payne-Wilkins there. Turn one on his own into the gravel. You don't often see switchbacks like that too often. And speaking of which, one of the Abruzzi cars in trouble, Joey Petrick.
Yeah, losing a couple of spots heading through turn 5 up towards turn number 6, and that is not ideal at all for Joey Petrick, who's actually been quite competitive over this season, has had some pretty good results, and I think, oh no, did get into a bit of contact there with, I think, one of the Porsches, and of course that is not ideal because he lost around 6 or 7 positions because of that one. But of course, with such a long race, even if you lose some positions now, you can certainly pull it back as the race goes on. As here is Franek Sikorsky.
Yeah, Sikorsky doing well. I think there Arthur Thurtle gets away with one because that was a case of someone just turning across their own nose. But Franek here has had a really nice start to the season. I think he'd love to go even quicker and build a lot more of that margin that he lost last time out at the Autodromo Internacional Algarve and get it straight back. He's got David Mendonca that he's gone through. So that's an AM passing a pro over the course of this lap. And remember that there is that balance of performance to keep in mind. Some cars will do better here than they will do at other places. A lot of drivers have chosen to go to the Ford Mustang at the front of the championship, but the Porsche might have a few struggles here today because the Porsches are naturally better at more technical circuits.
Yeah, certainly. And we saw a couple of the Porsche struggling as well on these first opening laps, as here's a battle further ahead. This is between Matthias Perhonen and William Guthrie as they make their way through the first corner, and we have a Pro-Am on the back of one of the pros here. Of course, Guthrie leading that category ahead of Jack Osborne and Joe Newman. They're sitting P7, 8 and 9. So a good start for some of our Pro-Am cars here this evening. And of course, Guthrie would love to try and jump into that top 6 and actually prove that these Pro-Ams can fight with our pro drivers. And I'll be honest, between I'd say the top 5 or 6 in Pro-Ams could all probably fit in the pro category perfectly fine.
Well, I turn around and look at the overall in terms of the championship. If you bundled everybody together, Aiden Carter, who leads the Pro-Am category in terms of points, would be 7th by 2 points behind Marley Joffe at the moment. That tells you how quick some of these drivers are that come in, week out, look to try and prove how much pace they've got. Matthias Perhonen very happily holding his place right now, knowing that you've got William Guthrie there in tow, and then Jack Osborne looking to try and figure out what ways there are to try and move through. Jack has been a little bit unlucky over the first part of this season, but when he has come good, he's been really on it like a car bonnet. It's been the way to describe it. The Atomic Esports car looking to try and stay in range of both Guthrie there, the Northern Ireland driver, and Matthias Perhonen, the Finn.
Yes, certainly, and I suppose Jack is in a bit of a position now where he's probably waiting for these two to battle, maybe come together at some stage so he can charge through and jump up into the top six himself. Of course, behind him, Joe Newman as well, just sitting there waiting for things to happen. Arthur Thurtle as well has made a couple of positions on the start. He's looking to try and push a little bit further ahead, actually closing in quite nicely onto the back of Arthur Thurtle. But a really good start here for William Guthrie, still on the back of Matthias Perhonen as they head back down towards turn number 1. Is there a possible move on the cards? No, not on this occasion. Did close up out of that final corner of turn 14, but then didn't really get much of a slipstream or a run down into that first corner. So I think a lot of making moves down to turn 1 is just getting an absolutely perfect exit of turn 14, and pretty much you have to be alongside already.
Well, let's talk about what recovery is going to mean here today for someone like James Boomy, for example. He's down in 39th position at this moment in time and desperately needs to claw back any and all places he can. And he's got himself an hour and 34 minutes to do so. But scrapping continues close then in and around for 6th, 7th and 8th places. But Perhonen runs slightly wide there at turn 5, just about avoids the dramas, and will continue on then through the very dark skies here around this Road America circuit. Michael Gray who is there in 12th position right now, is going to be thinking about what's behind and what's in front, because he knows that in this group, he's caught with Tommy Vettel, Arthur Thurtle, and Joe Newman. But behind him, Chris Chatterton, the Pro-Am category championship leader Aiden Carter, and Josh Boot. That's not easy, especially as well with Phil Samways and Joey Petrick trying to recover back through this pack.
Yeah, indeed. There's some really competitive Pro-Ams here looking to try and make their way forward. Of course, Michael Gray, I think, has been brilliant so far this season for the Pro-Ams, and will certainly be looking to move forward here in this race and jump up into the top 10 himself. Of course, ahead of him is Tommy Vidal, who's been another really good driver so far this season as they make their way through. And of course, looking at the front there, that gap between the top two staying quite consistent as they all make their way through. 8/10 between Davidson and McFarlane. Then that's where that gap starts to grow back to mileage off in third place. That's about 2 seconds to Ross McFarlane. So the good thing here is for Davidson and McFarlane, they've got a bit of a buffer, so now they can just relax a bit and just get into this race, get some consistent pace, and then of course see what happens as the next 1 hour and 30 minutes goes. But they're really in a comfortable spot, and this is really going to hurt James Boom even more.
Yeah, because they're not scrapping at the front, and their teammates, as Josh Boot makes a big throw at turn number 1, dives through in the Mercedes pass, one of the sole Lamborghinis this season to get that done. The tricolor there of the likes of the green, the white and the red that is seen works a treat then to get by. That is for the driver in front, which will be Josh Boot. Now it's Phil Samway's turn to try and unlock this overtake here inside this opening run. We will say that pit window is pretty much open now at this point for a two-stop strategy, but I'd expect most drivers to try and run that tank. That's a little deep there from Josh Boot. It opens up a half chance up the hill for Aiden Carter, but if you're going to scare yourself through the middle of the corner, Josh, you're going to lose not 1, not 2, but round goes Joey Petrick there, the Czech, the Swiss driver there to make that 3.
Indeed, that was a big mistake there for Josh Boot, and it wasn't the fact that he lost loads of time, it's the fact that there's cars there waiting and looking for the taking, and unfortunately lost 3 positions in the process and only lost about 1.5 seconds because of that. As here's Howard Hassan as they make their way through. Now, was that a little bit of contact? I think it was a slight bit of contact. Maybe it could have been a bit of netcode there between those two, and someone further back as well also got into a spin. So lots of things happening here, and we've still got 1 hour and 30 to go. So for many drivers, it could be a very long evening.
It can do, and remember, points are going to be absolutely critical, and one of the ways that you're rewarded in this series for scoring points, Nathan, is by how clean you drive over the course of the race. If you've got the least amount of incident points over the course of the race, you get a few extra bonus points, plus if you score over a certain amount of threshold over the course of the race, they start docking you championship points for it.
Yeah, so you've got to be really careful when you get yourself into incidents, running wide, making contact. It's something that the drivers have got to think about heavily in these races. Here we go back down towards turn 1. Samways on the back of Aiden Carter for 14th place as they head through that first corner. And I've got to say, I think Aiden Carter's done a superb job, because from my lack of racing knowledge, I don't think the Lamborghini is actually that good when it comes to the meta strategy. So Aiden Carter in that car has done a superb job so far this season. And then, of course, Samways behind in the Mercedes looking to try and make a move, looking to get into 14th place. But yeah, Carter's holding his own very well here so far.
Well, reality is this, that it has got an Audi-based engine in it, and that's going to be a little throw to the inside, because Carter was pretty much in no man's land in the middle of the apex there at turn 5. It forces Phil Samways to the inside. They fight for the exit there. Little bit of a tag between them, but Samways is going to have to lose out in terms of that one, and Joey Petrick is going to watch on, waiting for a chance to make that McLaren shine and find itself a way through. This is what I love to see here with styles of racing like GT3 often brings. It's 3 different manufacturers fighting out for 3 different places.
Indeed, brilliant stuff so far. Carter once again a little bit deep into the grass there, and Samways will be looking to close in, but then look at that behind, as I think Joe Petrick involved, Josh Boot as well, looking to close back in, and then a little bit further down the road is the McLaren Franek Sikorsky as we head our way back through. And here we go to the inside for Samway's not quite in the move, and Carter's still keeping himself ahead, but this is going to be a really good battle. And I think the annoying part here, and this is why Samways will be kicking himself, is because Chatterton and Gray are starting just to pull that gap away, and of course they're in that same category, so realistically Samways needs to get through and start charging forward.
Well, he does, but he's got time to do so. And this is the thing with the endurance rounds. You don't have to make the moves as quick as a whisper, which is what you have to do in some of the other rounds that you see, the sprints, the features, the technicals that you've got out there. You have time to craft a move. You have time to assess and find out what a weakness is. It's like going back to Test cricket after having hour after hour, day after day of T20 and 100 cricket to go through. Look at this battle here that's going on. James Boomey, I think, has just gone through an entire pack, and now he's going to be looking to try and leapfrog to the next.
Indeed, and this has been a decent recovery so far for James Boomey, of course dropping down to 41st, only 3 or 4 corners in on lap 1, and now he's looking to move up to 34th and just try and get some decent points here. And of course, if Alexander Davidson only being 41 points back, there is a big opportunity for the Scotsman to try and take some much needed points and potentially launch himself into that championship lead. Of course, McFarlane is 140 points back, so it's going to put a dent in that gap to him and James Boomey, but I wouldn't say it's much for Boomey to worry about just yet. But with still another hour and 27 minutes to go, certainly big opportunities as Joe Coffin looking to go to the inside of Howard Hassan. Of course, Howard Hassan had some contact here at turn 5 a couple of laps ago, but makes it through unscathed this time.
Jesse Payne-Wilkins will follow then, straight down the inside, easy as you like. Despite having an off and a spin, Jesse Payne-Wilkins now is up a double-digit positions, plus 10 for the day, because we've had one non-starter in Jonathan Walker, and then retirees Eric Muxka and Elliot Roberts, who are both out. And I am relied on good information that as far as it goes here today, Elliot did hold his brakes the entire way as he had his incident out there, which would indicate to me that, of course, the braking property is very much not as good on grass, and as such, maybe a little cadence brake might have helped to keep the car pointed in the right direction. That's the only thing I think could have prevented more in terms of that accident from going ahead. Joey Petrick now looking to sit in 16th position, and he's been stymied over the last run. Right now, seeing Josh Boot and Phil Samways and Aidan Carter right now just in front. This is tough because Joey right now needs to find something that's going to fit, and at the moment, sitting on the back of this group and just trying to keep some calm going along in the early stages, yeah, it keeps the group behind at bay of Sikorsky and co, but you're not really showing any hand at the moment. I wonder whether Petrick's waiting for pit stops.
Yeah, that could be the case, because even though we've seen that Petrick has got some decent pace, he's never really looked like he's going to launch an attack or go for any moves. He seems happy sitting in P17 at the moment, just crawling on the back of Josh Boots and those ahead. So yeah, it could be the fact that he's waiting for pit stops, maybe waiting for some more battles ahead. But yeah, he's got to certainly try and think of something and try and move forward in this race as we make our way through. And of course, in the Petrick in the green and white McLaren as they make their way through. And then, of course, behind those is going to be Franek Sikorsky, who has brought that gap down once again. The gap was around 3 or 4 seconds. It's now down to 2.1, and behind him it's Andy Archer, Taylor Lane as well, looking to push forward. So this could potentially put a little bit of pressure down on Joe Petrick as the laps go under, as that's going to be James Boomey, another position made, and up into 33rd ahead of Oriol Durant. And of course, still looking to make some moves. And next on the list for Boomey will be Paul Smith, but that gap sits at 6.3 seconds. So Boomey has got a little bit of free air to push, and of course try and bring that gap down to the leaders.
Well, he is losing half a second a lap at the moment to them, because Alexander Davidson is running in the high war 209, the 201s, low 202s. There goes a Porsche off the road, and you don't often see too much of that going wrong, as that will be an awkward chance to get back up to speed again. And it looks like there is going to be a case of Colin Sansom there, who was the lapped car who went off the the road and had that spin through. Bill Mitchell bend, unsuspecting turn 13, as Aiden Carter will lose out the place, will gain the place back, against Phil Samways. What a fantastic group of four that continues. Josh Boot now throws one to the inside. Petrick will follow in suit, and Phil Samways leaves the garden gate open, and everyone jumps on through.
Indeed. Brilliant moves there from Boot and Petrick still looking to be on the outside as they head their way down to the next braking zone. Let's see, is there going to be a move for 15th place? Petrick has pulled himself completely alongside into turn 5. That's going to be very close as they make their way through, a little bit wide, and touch of the grass there as they make their way through, and back up the inside will be Phil Samways, looking to go back ahead into 16th place. Can he get the move done? I think he can, and Phil Samways up another position, but back up the inside for Joe Petrick. A great battle here between these two, and Petrick back into 16th place. And of course Phil Samways tried and tried again to get ahead of Aiden Carter, couldn't make it work. So what can Josh Boot do? Can he try and offer something different in this battle for 14th place and try and get ahead of that Lamborghini?
Well, can you continue to find the pace? Can you continue to unlock overtakes? And are you costing each other time by battling so aggressively in the early stages? Those are all questions that will need to be asked over the course of the racing that we've got. And I would say that, at least for the moment, there has been a threat of rain on the horizon. That threat has been reducing as we've been going about. So it doesn't look likely that rain is going to be too much of a big factor at this moment. But I'd say when you've got skies like this, you never think that you're truly out of the woods.
Yeah, certainly. Of course, I don't have access into any of the weather, but it just seems like there's always got to be that chance of rain appearing on circuit, and that would certainly throw a curveball into this one. As here is a possible move by Josh Boot to the outside of Aiden Carter. A bit of contact, bit of wheel banging into turn one between these two GT3s, and off the track goes Josh Boot.
Boot gets dumped to the outside there as he thought he had the clearance in the middle of the corner, and ultimately it's front to rear. That is as traditional of a spin as you can see. It's what we call quarter paneling.
Of course, and this was such a horrible situation for Boot. Did pull through to the outside, of Aiden Carter, and whether it was the fact that Aiden Carter had a bit of understeer, or maybe Josh Boot closed that door a little on the outside, and of course that ended up with him off the track at turn 1. But around here, as I said earlier on, there's lots of opportunities to overtake, but if you make a mistake, it's so harmful for your race. And of course Boot there losing so many positions down to 25th place.
That's a big one there for Taylor Lane, who hits the wall on the outside of turn 6, trying to carry the speed up the hill. It's one of the toughest things. And there's another car that's turned around there. That's Joey Petrick, who's crabbing around. His day's going to be done.
Indeed, and that looks like he's had some sort of contact somewhere. That car is definitely not in good shape to continue. As further ahead, what's happened to Matthias Bahonen? He's lost a few positions down to P9 as it stands, as they continue on. But Joe Petrick, a little bit similar to what happened to, I think it was Eric Mutzke, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a case of just catching the curb wrong, and it all disappears from there. It looks for Matthias Pirhanen like he's just about been able to recover it, but he's dropped a lot of time, and I think he's having connection issues. Oh, that would do it. That would absolutely do it.
Oh, what a shame. And of course, no rear wing. That means back to the pitch you go. Big shame there for Matthias. There's a few more drivers now looking to enter the pitch. Jack Osborne also with damage from 14th place. So many drivers now running into some heavy issues. Osborne's in the pits. I think also we did see Pirhanen as well head into the pit lane as we continue our way on. And this is Mendoka as well in a battle further back as they head their way back down towards turn 1. And Daniel McCauley, what a race, up by 14 spots. This has been superb so far, and I think it was round 2 when I was last here. McCauley once again was just superb, and makes me think, how is he in the category?
Well, he's not going to get through by turning into the car alongside him. Jack Osborne was caught there in the incident with Matthias Pirhanen, who I think had only just got himself back into position, and both of them now will be taking their one fast repair available for this race and trying to make something happen of it. McCauley then seeing side by side, and that's a big look down the inside by Dennis Grabowski, who I think was very out of place, having not set a time in qualifying. He couldn't, of course, due to penalties. So from 44th up to now looking for 17th place and not there yet. That's not bad for under half an hour's worth of work to pick up 25 spots worth of places.
Yeah, certainly that has been a really good driver. A little bit undercover there by Grabowski, as this is Ben Altria looking to make moves as well as McCauley goes a tad wide. That could allow a move possibly for Grabowski as they make their way through, and Altria just sitting there behind waiting to get involved into this little battle himself as they make their way through. And look at that further ahead. McCauley under some heavy pressure from Dennis Grabowski as they make their way through. And let's see, is there going to be any dive to the inside here as they make their way through? No. And for now, Grabowski seems happy to sit there and never mind a little bit wide from McCauley.
Well, this is the issue. Dan McCauley thinks he's got the corner sorted. He just carries his natural speed in, and suddenly he finds himself lollygagging in the middle of the corner, and Dennis Grabowski, who is lightning fast, will just chuck it up the inside at a moment's notice. That's the difference between Pro and Am, and it's about the mid-corner speed, which makes all the difference around this place. Anyone can pin their foot down to the floor, but it's the confidence to do it through the corners, to use that rear spoiler, to get the aerodynamic grip, as Phil Samways now eyes up Aidan Carter in terms of can they find a little pass here, a little pass there to get the changes required to gain the next place.
Indeed, and this has been a battle which has been here pretty much every lap, bar a couple, of course, when Josh Boots went through into 15th. And Samways once again looking to try and get the move ahead of Aidan Carter, who has been brilliant in defence so far in this race into turn 5. Knows when to defend and knows when not to, because sometimes you see mistakes where when drivers are under pressure, such as Aidan Carter, they start defending free air, defending nothing. But Aidan knows specifically when to defend and when to think, actually, I can still take the normal racing line because there won't be a send coming from Phil Samways, and that is probably what has kept him in that really good spot as Martin Toth there getting back ahead of Marlijoff further up the field. That's for a podium place, as that gap between second and third still increasing, 3.5 seconds now separating McFarlane and Toth. And once again, Davidson and McFarlane absolutely brilliant so far in this race, and Joff still looking to try and get back ahead of Toth.
Marlijoff, the 909 machine, there is now looking about, thinking, what do I need to do to get back into the podium positions? You look at that time, it has exploded out to 4.5 seconds, so there's been a lot of time lost over the course of this lap, and you are starting to look at Alexander Davidson and Ross McFarlane. There's two drivers who are just about starting to split. 1 second now between them at the front, and if the rubber band snaps at 1.5 seconds around a draft-dependent track like this one, you are very much seeing this race go a long, long way the wrong way for certain drivers out there. It takes two to tango around here, so do you have your dance partner ready?
Well, that's certainly a question as we continue our way on, of course. We've got some great battles between, well, not really a battle between first and second because they're teammates, but they're really doing a great job just to keep pulling that gap. Of course, Toth and Josh sitting in third and fourth doing a great job. But then Ev Doka as well, who's kind of in a bit of no man's land here, has got a 5-second gap ahead to Marlijoff and a 6-second gap back to William Guthrie, doing a really good job in that 989 car. And of course, Guthrie and Newman doing a superb job as well. Arthur Thurtle as well, making his way forward with Michael Gray on the back of him. We have got some brilliant performances, and we're only about half an hour in, so I'll have to be a little bit careful because there's been many occasions where I said, oh, this driver's doing perfect. 10 minutes later, I was in 40th position, I've hit the wall. So sometimes I end up eating my own words.
It is so easy to find yourself in trouble, but this is one of the few circuits out there where you do find that a big incident is never a million miles away. Tommy Vedel and co is the focus right now on screen, behind Arthur Thurtle on screen. There we're running with Michael Gray, the main focus out there. Tommy Vedel there just behind Chris Chatterton, going, wait for me, lads, as he sits on the back and tries to keep himself somewhat available here in this scrap for 8th, 9th, 10th and 11th along the Kettle Bottoms over in towards Canada Corner, and now starting to think about the end of the lap. Bill Mitchell bend slightly off camber as you run on through, so it's single track through here, and then turn number 14. That ends the lap out on what is a 4-mile circuit, and then back up on the power again. You really have to be launching along this section to say, this is how quick I have to go.
Certainly, and we can see Chadderton has brought that gap down. He's really closing in now to the battle for 8th place and down as Gray still closing in on the back of Thurtle, but no move can be put onto the card just yet for the Mercedes as they make their way through. And then, of course, Tommy Vidal in P10, who's been doing a superb job this race. Only gained 1 spot, but has been consistent. He's sitting there still looking to push forward, as I think that was a move further down between Dan McCauley and Louis Hesketh as McCauley goes through and Hesketh fights back. That's a great battle for 17th, and that's a battle for 2nd in the AM category. So I'm sure we'll have a look at that one later on. But still Vidal on the back of Gray, looking to close in and make some moves. Just can't quite get anything done just yet as Dennis Grabowski gets involved in something further back.
Oh, that's not angle we normally see. He's turned around, and that will be through turn 3, and I think he was all on his own doing it then. So as he was putting so much pace down on the books, he's actually just spun the car on his own. So now he's back behind Ben Bennyworth, the AM, which puts him back to 22nd. As we've been keeping an eye out here, there's been so much great racing to keep in mind. There has been contact between Louis Hesketh and Ben Altria, so second in the AM category championship, going for a 360. Not part of what the doctor has ordered to, but it is all about the groups that stay close and who's happy to stay where they are. We go back to that group then of Hesketh and McCauley and Altria and co, who are all there, which is now a 4-car group of Jacques Eva, Håkon Ida Lindmo, Louis Hesketh and Ben Altria. So those two have fallen back into the next group.
Indeed, as we make our way through, and Hesketh looking to try. Is there damage on that car? Is that a glitch? I can't quite tell.
Oh, there's a lot on the front.
The
entire front clip there, Nathan, is completely gone.
That's certainly going to cause some issues, isn't it, as this race goes on?
Well, you don't have the joys of the front splitter there, which gets the aerodynamic downforce pinned in on the front, so you're going to be lacking so much. And because you're not getting a clean hit of air as you hit the car, you're actually hurting your fuel consumption as well.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, it is a bit of a race end where you can continue to the end, but it makes everything so much more difficult as we continue on. You see Ben Bennyworth looking to close in onto the back of, well, was Louis Hesketh, who's in the pit lane now in the McLaren. And we'll see what he can do, of course. Made 5 positions from the start, did a really good job on the start, but of course damage on his car certainly going to cost him some time.
Well, he will surely get the fast repair and back out and going again as Chris Chatterton makes a move for the top 10 on Tommy Vettel. Turn 5, looking to strike again, but Vettel trying to get cheeky on the exit of 5. He was on the outside off the racing surface, and effectively Chatterton didn't have to let him back on at that point. He gives a little bit of room, but Chris still takes that place, and the Nomad car doesn't seem so lonely anymore in 10th place.
Indeed, it was a much-needed move there for Chris Chatterton, because you could see that gap was starting to fly down, and of course really needs to get that move done ahead of Vidal, and then of course closing on Gray. And Thurtle ahead has done a really good job so far. Hasn't really been involved in that much. We haven't spoke much of Chris Chatterton so far, but certainly catching our eyes at the moment. Now looking to close down on Thurtle and Gray for 8th place, and then of course well, by the time he gets there, they might all pit. We'll have to see what happens, because the pit stops I don't think are that far away in this race, especially the first of possibly 2 or maybe 3 pit stops, depending on your strategy. As of course our top 2 still out on circuit. 1.3 seconds now separates Davidson and McFarlane, and that gap once again increasing back to Toth and Joff. And of course another thing about a big gap between 2nd and 3rd is that if Davidson and McFarlane make a slight mistake in the pit stops, or if they maybe pit a lap or 2 early or too late, they've got that much of a gap where that doesn't matter too much, and any mistake they make, unless it's something drastic, isn't going to really affect their position.
Well, I'll tell you what is interesting, watching James Boomy, because he's just found an easy way through with a bit of yellow helmet syndrome to get by Ben Bennyworth in the 96. So that will be enough to move up to 21st position. And Boomy can link up, actually, with one of his altitude frame teammates just in front of Dennis Grabowski as we continue on the scrap here between Arthur Thurtle and Michael Gray, and up to 3rd and 4th with Martin Toth and Marley Joffe, then, who work out and say, this is where we're going to have our battles out there on track. But I would say that as far as it goes, you're starting to ask the question here, how far up can James Boomy go at 53 seconds off the race lead? Because if they're just heading towards halfway now, I still think a top 10 might be possible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's only got to gain 25 seconds on Chatterton, which I think is possible when it comes to James Boomy. I think it would be the same if it was Davidson or McFarlane. They're probably they're probably three, or maybe one or other, two others can do it, but not many could make that gap up, but those guys certainly could. And of course, Michael Gray and Arthur Thurtle, they're in their battles, losing time to the leaders. That just brings James Boomy forward. As here is Marley Joff once again on the back of Martin Toth. Can't quite find that move, and he's just still stuck on the back of Toth as they make their way through in towards the final couple of corners once again. And of course the question is, when do these guys decide to pit? The top 5, top 6, 7 haven't pitted yet in this race. They're all leaving it quite late here on this first stint, and now at 8 minutes to go, so around 35 minutes of the way through. And of course, as we see, oh, is that Drew Fletcher in the pit lane, or is that out of the race?
It is.
I'm not quite sure there.
Well, a little bit of A, a little bit of B there for Drew. He's 8 laps down at the moment. I think that pretty much sells it quite nicely. Now, interesting there, Marley Joffe, very happy to just hit the brake slightly earlier, lift and coast into the corner, save a little bit of fuel as he's trying to gain the lap by staying behind Martin Toth. He doesn't have to make these moves, but Martin will make life easier for a pass if he continues to run wide out of turn 3 as they dip under the Sargento Bridge here in what is Wisconsin. We are pretty much right slap bang between Green Bay and Milwaukee. As to the outside tries Marley Joffe, that won't work there at turn number 5, and in fact he goes so wide that he's got to serve a slowdown penalty before he gets himself back up to racing speeds again. And because this is such a factor, this Road America circuit, it forms I would say a massive group of circuits like Monza. You would put in there circuits that are easy to drive, that a lot of people like to run, like Spa for example. It gets a lot of attention, and so track limits also gets a lot of attention, as now James Boomy is linked up with his altitude frame esports teammate.
Certainly, as they continue on, of course, the car ahead will be Dennis Grabowski as they make their way down towards turn number 5. And of course, Boomy looking to make one other place in this race. Of course, he's down by 13, but has made 20 because he was down to, I think, 41st at the start of the race, or 40th, one of those two, and he's up into 20th. Shouldn't be long before he gets up into 19th. And then, of course, a chance of a top 10 gets even nicer for him as they all make their way through, as I think Paul Smith there losing a couple of spots further back because Jacques Seaver and Taylor Lane just exiting the pit lane. They came out down in the mid-30s as we continue our way on. And Boomy, surprisingly, not being let through by Grabowski. I wouldn't think he'd make it this hard, but as all the top 2 are in, that's both of the teammates from WSR, Davidson and McFarlane.
And they will be followed into the pits by Toth and also as well by Marley Joffe. So it now means Michael Evdoka has been able to run longer in that opening stint and will now take command at the front. Guthrie is in, Newman is in. I would say this is a universal call, but Alexander Davidson, I think, has been caught speeding on the lane.
Oh, dear me. Black flag for Alexander Davidson. Things didn't go right for Boomy. Things haven't gone right for Alexander Davidson. Does anybody want to win this race at this point? Absolute carnage, and we've still got an hour and 5 minutes to go here.
Well, I put it to you like this. It's a 72 km/h pit speed. It's one of the toughest braking zones to get in. He was absolutely on it and fine as he went through, but I think he was just taking too much liberty down the pit lane, and as such went over. And look at how many drivers are going to go by. The speed gun never lies, and at the moment Alexander Davidson was given a huge free kick by a driver like James Boomy. James Boomy was trying to sell fire insurance on a burning building, and Alexander Davidson said no thanks.
Yeah, big shame there for Davidson. Will lose lots of spots in this race, and that will put, I think, Ross McFarlane into that net race lead, and that would be really good for Ross McFarlane. Of course, last time 18 ran 7 and 8, didn't take a podium at all. So being able to take one here this evening will be really good for him, and potentially that race win as well. And there is Alexander Davidson.
Ooh.
Comes out in P17. Who's is that?
Aiden
Davidson
Carter, Pro-Am leader in the championship. Aiden Carter dumps it straight out the pits.
Dear me, what a shame there for Aiden Carter. Had such a good start to this race and near collecting a couple of cars as they make their way through. But what a shame for Aiden Carter. Had such a good start, was defending perfectly, and unfortunately will have a spin and go off into the gravel. But we'll continue on. This is the onboard of Carter into turn 1, of course. Very cold tyres on that Lamborghini. Makes his way through and, yeah, loses it completely. It just looked like the car had no control whatsoever there.
Michael Evdoka now will hit the pits, and surely Arthur Thurtle, Michael Gray and Håkon Idle Lindmo are due in too. I would also keep an eye on James Boomy at the moment, who will be another candidate to jump into the pit. So 1, 2 and 3 all down in on the lane at the moment, and no such dramas for Michael Evdoka, who jumps up then on to the jacks, will take fuel, will take tyres, and will look to get going once again. By comparison, there is Ross McFarlane and co, who are there, who are trying to jump up. So James Boomy will now move into the race lead here as the only car of the leaders who is yet to come in and pit. Longest stop of all, Ross McFarlane hunting him down though, 3.4 seconds behind.
Indeed, and the gap between McFarlane and Davidson sits at around 35 seconds. So big cost there for Davidson for speeding in the pit lane. And McFarlane, he's pretty much been handed a race victory here. Second at the moment, looks like it will be going the way of Michael Evdoka. He's came out ahead of Joff and Toth. So very good there for Michael Evdoka indeed. As what was that? McFarlane there slowing down, it seemed.
So that's Joe Newman, who is there in 10th position at the moment and looking to try and get around the likes of William Guthrie. I didn't quite catch that there, but they are certainly continuing on with Michael Gray just in front. Now, remember, with the likes of Michael Evdoka, he's got to get his tyres up to temperature, so being in front is one thing. Having tyre temperature to fight the cars behind is another. That's why sometimes getting an undercut is so important here. It's because tyre temperature is going to be critical on what is a very cold track. Guthrie with a great run here. Michael Gray doesn't get the best of runs. Evdoka back down now into 5th, could soon be 6th as there goes the pass. Gray trying to hold the insides, heading to the hurry downs, but William Guthrie round the outside gets the move done.
Indeed, a superb textbook move there by Guthrie as Joe Newman sent it to the inside. There's a bit of contact. That was a bit too late on the brakes for Joe Newman, and Michael Gray will go round. What a shame for Michael Gray, who's driven such a good race, will lose a position or two and, of course, lose a lot of time. And that will be Phil Samways going through, jumping up into the top 10 there. 3rd now in the Pro-Am category. Big shame for Michael Gray, but of course, still an hour to go. Still has a long race to try and pull some of those positions back as they all continue on, and still has a decent gap ahead of Chris Chatterton as James Boomy is into the pit lane.
Take another look. Late lunge down the inside, and he's always trying to take the corner away. Michael Gray runs a bit wide, and look at all that gravel deposited back onto the circuit. That will affect every driver there for the next couple of laps off the exit, with Boomy in the pits. Ross McFarlane leads. I believe Tom Griggs is still due to pit at the moment. Started 38th, and he's still out there going. So he's obviously whispering to the fuel tank at the moment. He's done something that everyone else can't out there, which is go longer than everybody else. Marley Joffe then is effectively net 2nd. Martin Toth net 3rd, and Michael Evdoka then in 4th. And you start looking around and saying Alexander Davidson versus the likes of those at the front. This is going to be a very tough day for Alexander Davidson, now back in 14th position when they cross the line, and knowing that he's got to get up by the next few drivers, Tommy Vettel, Chris Chatterton, and then Michael Gray.
Indeed, and James Boomy comes out in P17, only 4 positions away from Alex Davidson, and the gap between them is around 10 seconds. So this is really a helping hand for James Boomy as we continue our way on back down towards turn 4 for Alex Sikorsky.
So this is James Boomy straight out the pits, and Dan McCauley, the AM category championship leader, now who is leading this race in AM with Franek Sikorsky just behind, gets a car in between, and it just so happens to be the championship leader. Great work by Dan. James Boomy's half defending here. He doesn't want Franek Sikorsky through.
No, he does not, and that really helps Dan McCauley to keep Sikorsky back. Of course, they are battling, like you said, for the lead of the AM category. So this is a really good situation at the moment for Daniel McCauley as they will make their way through, and James Boomy will be looking to try and put the pace down. We'll be looking to try and make some places and just eliminate some of that points loss between himself and Alexander Davidson as they all make their way through. Sikorsky has got some decent pace. Of course, Boomy's only been at the pits a lap, so needs to get those tyres nicely warmed up.
Not too wide at the kink. Oh, you never want to go too wide at the kink. And I think it was very wise there from Franek, Nathan, to decide I'm not going to go for it here. I'll get the run out over to Canada corner.
Yes, certainly moves to the inside, does Sikorsky, looking to scare James Boomy. It's one of the championship contenders in the AM category versus the overall championship leader. And Sikorsky goes through up into 18th place. The gap between himself and McCauley's now increased to 2 seconds, and that is really good for Daniel McCauley in his battle to try and take the race win once again in the AM category. Of course, took the race win in both races last time out in Portimao. Would love to make it 3 on the bounce as we continue our way on. Looking further at the front, the gap is, 8 seconds between first and second, as here is a battle for 5th, 6th and 7th. That gap's not 8 seconds, it's about 8/10. As Guthrie on the back of Thurtle. What a move this could be, and what a position this could be for our Pro-Am P5.
What a lunge down the inside. Joe Newman from a light year back. The lights flash from William Guthrie, who will say in his cockpit, I had to take avoiding action to allow you through. But Joe Newman will turn around and go, yeah, but I got ahead.
Oh, dear me. That was scary indeed, I think, for both Newman and Guthrie. I think Newman probably was a little bit scared himself. I don't think he thought he'd make the corner there, because that was a late lunge indeed. And Guthrie, very, very clever to get out of the way and not end up getting some damage there from that one, as Thurtle will have Joe Newman behind, and that is also probably quite scary for Thurtle, because if Joe Newman's making sends like that against Guthrie, he's going to probably try and do the same against Arthur Thurtle as we make our way through towards turn 12. And of course, look at that gap there between 4th and 5th. It's 13 seconds between those guys, so these can actually have a great battle. They don't need to worry about losing time to the cars ahead, because they're nowhere near close enough. So 5th, 6th and 7th can battle it out for position rather than just trying to keep close to the train ahead.
So as they are going to try and work together, they know that those margins are pretty sizable, and they are going to have to try and play the game together that says, what can we do? Arthur Thurtle holding that top 5 behind. Joe Newman proving that he's got a great ability to make passes. We've got John Roberts down in the pits then from 40th position out there at this stage, so not an ideal moment. I did see him in the gravel earlier on, so it looks like he's having a bit of troubles, and as a little bit of sunshine then starts to crest through at turn 3 here in Wisconsin at Elkhart Lake. It's now about looking around and seeing that Guthrie's going to maybe try and send the favour back potentially when they've got Arthur Thurtle there. It's a downhill braking zone into turn 5 out of the moraine sweep of turn 4, and that's what makes it difficult. And again, Joe Newman. Guys, the last of the late breakers. He'd make John Lacey look like he's tame.
What a move from Joe Newman once again up into 5th place. And like I said, when he made that move against William Guthrie, I knew he'd be trying to do the same to Arthur Thurtle. And into P5 goes Joe Newman. What a race it's been for him so far. As in other news, James Boomy has got that position back ahead of Franek Sikorsky, and there jumps into 17th place, about a second away from Dan McCauley. So 16th probably isn't that far away here for James Boomy. But a brilliant move for Joe Newman up into the top 5 overall in this race. And that is certainly the type of result that he would need indeed.
And I'll say as well, Alexander Davidson now up to 11th. He's through on Tommy Vedel, the Pro-Am from Norway. So that changes a position, and he'll be setting sights on Chris Chadson and co. And I think Alexander Davidson isn't out of the realms of a top 5 here today. I reckon he could catch Joe Newman into the remaining 55 minutes of this race, depending, and he is absolutely going to be take the bull by the horns and run with it. El Matador stepped well out of the way. It's now William Guthrie's turn to try and figure out a way here to get the pass done on Arthur Thurtle here. Pro driver versus Pro-Am, but critically, it's Mustang versus Porsche, and Thurtle at a very key disadvantage.
Certainly, as we head back down towards turn 1, is Guthrie going to go for the send or just sit back? No, chooses just to sit behind on the back of Arthur Thurtle at the moment, but has a great run out of turn 1 as they head through and towards turns 2 and 3. There could still be a move on the cards down towards turn 5. Of course, that's where we saw Joe Newman make 2 brilliant moves, and now it could be William Guthrie's turn to go for a late lunge to the inside. Thurtle does pull a nice distance out of turn 3. But down to turn 5 we go. Has Guthrie got the opportunity to go for that move and jump up ahead? But I don't think he has. I think he had a poor run out of 3 because he lost a lot of time. Down towards turn 5 into the braking zone they go. And still, Thurtle keeps that 6th spot ahead of William Guthrie. Joe Newman starting to pull that gap now, 6/10 between himself and Thurtle. He's got to try and get a second or 2 clear, break that slipstream away from Thurtle, and then become a little bit more comfortable in his race, because at the moment he'll still be thinking about the attack from Thurtle and Guthrie behind.
Not necessarily a retirement, but down in the pits without the front nose is Adam Hedgecock in the number 13. He's had a really tough day of things here today after contact on the opening laps of this one, so he's trying to work through. Second and third, by the way, 8 seconds off the race lead of Ross McFarlane as it currently stands, and Martin Toth and Marley Joffe, well, it's a case of Marley and me at the moment for Martin Toth. He can't really do anything. They've been each other's shadows all day long, and I think they're looking at this going, 8 seconds is a bit much. We're able to stave off Evdoka by 4. Let's try and give ourselves a podium.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they've been battling all race, and they've, it's never been silly moves. It's all been when, whenever they're alongside, they'll go, they'll go for it. And a lot of the time, the other one backs out, and they've made some great moves. They're just sticking themselves in a podium spot because they've got, there's no point battling because second and third at the moment is a given because Evdoka's not got the pace. There's 20 seconds back nearly to Martin Toth as a meatball flag goes through for the number 26 for Drew Fletcher.
Oh, his engine's gone in pit lane.
Oh, well, that's not ideal. I think that's safe to say.
I think it's safe to say he's idled for so long, sat there in the pits, his engine, he forgot to switch it off, and suddenly he's not got one anymore.
Dear me. Well, if you thought his race was over, it certainly is now.
Yeah, that's quite right. So, second and third continue on in their scrap, and to go back to the point, it's a case of how do you get a race like this between these two drivers that is as risk adverse as possible? Because it's an hour 45 and they've done the first half of the race now as they sit down and look to get themselves into play. The second half of the race is down to how do I gain that little advantage on the car in front? And I think if you're Martin Toth, I sit behind Marley Joffe, I let him use his fuel, and then I will save 1 lap and I will have slightly less time at that final stop.
Yeah, certainly. I think fuel strategy is a big one for these two here because you can see they're not keen on actually making moves on track because it's too much of a risk. So go for it off track, go for it in the pit lane and try and get those moves done there, of course, as they're still pulling that gap to Evdoka. They've actually not lost that much time to Ross McFarlane, to be fair. That gap's been consistently around 7 to 8 seconds for the past 10 minutes, so their pace isn't bad at all. It's just, of course, the gap that Ross McFarlane and Davidson pulled at the beginning is giving McFarlane such an advantage here. With 50 minutes to go, it would be a big mistake, or it would, I don't know, how even Ross McFarlane would lose the lead at this point, but it just doesn't seem possible at all as Davidson back into the top 10, gets the move done ahead of Chris Chatterton, and can look to try and set his sights on Phil Samways, Gray, Guthrie, and possibly even Arthur Thurtle.
And Joe Newman, I think he can get there as well. I said top 5, and he's just moved himself up into the top 10 with that pass and comfortably dispatching of that. I will also say that James Boomey has made a pass on AA, Andy Archer. He's not called the AA because he needs a tow truck every half a race. It's more the fact that he is out there and he is reliable.
Certainly, as they continue their way on back down towards turn 5, and Joff still ahead of Martin Toth is just sitting there waiting for something to happen. Probably at this point waiting for a mistake, but then in around half an hour time, we might be looking to actually get a move on and jump up into P2. As of course you can see, Toth all over the rear of Marley, as we have a battle further back between Grabowski and Franek Sikorsky. They're battling for, I believe, P18 and P19 as Guthrie gets ahead of Arthur Thurtle. That's a move that Guthrie wanted to make a long time ago. There's a black flag, there we go, I get my words out, goes out for Oriel Durant. And that is a much needed move for William Guthrie. Goes ahead of Arthur Thurtle and can try and push forward on the back of Joe Newman. But Joe Newman's got a 2-second gap now ahead of Guthrie.
Well, if you're going to take time trying to make these moves, you're going to see some gaps open up, and William Guthrie needed to make that happen at turn 5. He waited, and finally got the pass that was necessary. So it's well done there. A little bit of lap traffic then for the duo. That's Colin Sansom, who's trying to stay well out of the way. And that might open up Martin Toth here to try and have a little go at things in towards turn number 1, out of 14. One of the biggest rises over towards the line. A nightmare if you've underfueled the car by about a couple hundred meters, because how many races have died on Heartbreak Hill climbing up the top to get towards the end of the race? You got Martin Toth now figuring out, I'm still not quite there. I'm happy to sit behind and not show my cards just yet. We've still got a long race to go, and in the context, there's still a long way to figure it out, as here comes Grabowski down the inside of Dan McCauley, the AM category leader and championship leader, with Franek Sikorsky not a million miles away. The outside of turn 13, Bill Mitchell, Ben secure it on the inside of turn 14. That is wonderful from a driver who used to race at the very highest echelon with the likes of the Pure Racing team back in the day.
Indeed, a great move there from Dennis Grabowski. There's further back Adam Watson looking to try and get through on Dan McCauley as well.
Look at Franek.
Yeah, Franek's closing in as well, looking to close down, but of course Watson next on the list as they make their way into turn number 1. Is McCauley going to fight it? No, lets Watson through. But now Franek Sikorsky is right behind Dan McCauley. One position separates them both. When is Sikorsky going to go and attack? Because from what we saw earlier on, he wasn't afraid to make moves ahead of James Boomey. So certainly we'll be looking to get ahead of Dan McCauley.
2 places in 2 corners, and then maybe 3 corners later, it's Franek's turn to try and throw on down the inside. I think that's quite clever, though, by Dan McCauley. My battle's not with the pros. My battle is with the AM. I will not fight too hard against the pros. I will, though, however, defend heavily against the AMs. And in these conditions right now, we're at an in-sim time heading towards 6 o'clock. A mix of drivers using lights and not using lights. Where's your stance on it? Would you rather be Knight Rider or not?
I mean, I normally race in the day, so I'm used to it, but I'd rather, I don't know, I think sometimes it's quite nice to drive in the night. It's quite relaxing, you get into a nice rhythm, but I think sometimes I always get scared of what's going to be around the corner, because sometimes things just literally pop up like that, and you're like, oh no, I can't react. So I think for comfortability and just general driving, I like the night, but if I want to drive it safe and not worry about cars around me, go for the day.
As close as you like into turn number 1 for your drivers 2nd and 3rd, and they are trying to work together here a little bit. 7.6 was the gap as they crossed the line. 2:01.9 and a 2:02 flat. By comparison, a 2:02.2 on his own for Ross McFarlane. They are chipping away that gap at the front little by little, and that will play a little seed of doubt potentially in the mind of the Scotsman Ross McFarlane. If he starts stepping out of line, makes a small mistake because he's got a gap, suddenly they'll eat into it.
Certainly, but there's also a chance that maybe McFarlane is trying to save a little bit of fuel here and maybe go a little bit longer on this stint before pitting once again before the end. That is always a possibility, but it could also be down to the fact that Joff and Toth have got some nice pace as the fog disappears and things start to look a little bit more clearer here on track around Road America. And still, the very same things between 2nd and 3rd, just sitting together, controlling their race, and still pulling that gap to Michael Avdoka. That gap now is around 5.5 seconds between 3rd and 4th. And then, of course, looking further back, Joe Newman still pulling that gap ahead of William Guthrie. And also, that gap has really decreased between Michael Gray and Arthur Thurtle now, because Thurtle seems to be coming under a lot of pressure here, because Joe Newman got the move, Guthrie's got the move, and Gray's only 3 seconds back.
with Phil Samways and with Alexander Davidson there, who will both want to try and get through and start jumping up and saying, look at me, I'm starting to find some points and some all-important places. Martin Toth very happy then in sitting down in position number 3. You can see the flag of Czechia there on the wings, or the tips there of the spoiler there. You can see running on by. Absolutely beautiful paint livery work going on through, and you get some wonderful liveries in this series. It shows just how much time and dedication every team goes to. But again, this is another thing. It is going to be Mustang versus the AMG Mercedes, and that AMG Mercedes is one of the best cars through the gears.
Yeah, certainly. I think the AMG is very, I think overall just comfortable everywhere. It's not always OP in, you know, certain aspects, but it's good in everything. So I think that's what makes it a really good car. It's what I normally drive when I play the game, just mainly because I like the engine sound. I'm not quick enough to benefit off a car being better or worse. I like the engine sound, so I get along with it, and, you know, I drive quite well in the Merc. But of course, the Porsche, the Mustang is also two really quick cars that we've seen so far in this race. I think the Mustang is probably the most popular, I think, this evening. I think there's more of them than anything, but there's a few McLarens on the grid as well, a couple of Mercs, and then I think that one sole Lamborghini.
Yeah, and they've been locked with that from the start of the season. Now, here is the interesting matter of fact here about this season, though, Nathan. They are allowed one car swap over the course of this season to change from whatever car they're running into a different car, but they have to run that car then for the rest of the season. We expected maybe a lot of drivers to go to the Aston Martin, expecting that that might be the car that, you know, gets itself over the line, is a lot quicker, it does the job. We've only had about 3 or 4 over the course of the entire group decide that the Aston Martin is the best way forward. There's another little look from Franek Sikorsky, trying to eye up a pass on Dan McCauley, and is struggling then in the AM category battle for the race lead. But it really is a case of, if you're comfortable with something, try and run it.
Oh yeah, definitely, because I think sometimes if you can get the most out of a car, sometimes that is better than having the best car, because you can find pace that others can't in your said car. So yeah, I think it all depends on the driver's preferences. You know, some of them have been driving the same cars for years. On this game, of course, there's been, you know, patches and changes, but a lot of the time it stays very similar as Davidson makes a move ahead of Phil Samways. But yeah, I'd prefer preference over just outright pace, and, you know, for many drivers that works out, and that works for Aiden Carter. I don't see many people opt for a Lamborghini, but Aiden Carter has some right damn pace in that Lamborghini, or at least most weeks does. Unfortunately, today hasn't gone to plan, but on most events he's right up there with some of the top guys.
Phil Samways has lost the place then to Alexander Davidson, and now it's Michael Gray's turn to suddenly play defender. Traffic out the pits, they're just about going to avoid there. That's Howard Hassan, the Welshman, then getting out of the way of them. But now down the hill through turn 3, Andy Archer hits the instant point limit, and he will get a black flag penalty. So he'll have to come down the lane, trundle about, serve his points, and then get himself back up to speed again. That's big for Andy Archer, because he was running really well actually in this race. Now Davidson will eye up turn 5 through the Moraine Sweep, now looking for the inside. This is as bread and butter basic as a pass gets, and he's just so much more committed on the brakes than what Michael Gray is.
Indeed, and I don't think Michael Gray even thought of that, because if he does fight Davidson, he's going to lose time, and that is not what he wants to do. Through goes Alexander Davidson into P8, and is now around 6 seconds away from that top 5. With 40 minutes to go, with the fact that he brought that gap down so quickly, there might even be a chance he can close down to Michael Evdoka. And, you know, on pure pace and with the time he's got, probably not, but Evdoka will start to push more because he knows there's a closing car behind, and that's when you start forcing yourself into mistakes and over pushing the car. That's what could help Davidson here compared to Michael Evdoka. But I think, yeah, that race win seems sorted. Same for second and third, but then fourth below, always a few questions around.
Speaking of a few questions, more retirements then to note, because Brian Loynes is a retiree here in this race as well, at 8 laps down at the moment. So from the 47 starters and the 1 non-starter in Jonathan Walker, we haven't lost many in this field, but we've lost a decent amount as they've been looking to try and put down the hard yards and get these laps sorted here in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. With 40 minutes to go on the clock, you can argue any pit stop from now is a chance to say, I can make something happen at the end of this race and get it done. Just behind, here comes the scrap then on the straight, Matthias Pirhanen. Then with the likes of Tommy Vettel, and then the lap down Howard Hassan, Pirhanen himself trying to recover, and that's a move that puts him up to 12th.
Indeed, a nice move indeed there from Matthias. Of course, got into some issues earlier on in the race, back up into P12. Of course, then 10 seconds back from Vidal is going to be James Boomy, looking to close down. Sits in P14. He's not that far away from the top 10 himself. I think he can certainly get there by the time we conclude this race in 39 minutes time. As we can see further ahead as well, Davidson has brought that gap down once more to the back of Arthur Thurtle. Only 1 second now separates those two, so that move for 7th place isn't that far away for Alexander Davidson, as they all file through into turn 6, and Vidal as well, still keeping Matthias Pirhanen for company.
Tommy Vettel doing a great job at the moment here in the number 37 as he eyes up Pirhanen through the hurry downs and into turn number 8, leading over to turn... Oh, and that's a spinner, and that's a big spinner. That's Franek Sikorsky, who's gone round in 2nd position in the AM category championship, or in the AM category today. He runs into the corner and he gets run over because he got too close to Icarus, being Dan McCauley, and then Tom Griggs, who of course made that very late first pit stop, had nowhere to go except through him.
Indeed, and that is a big mistake there made by Sikorsky. Too late into the brakes into his teammate, and unfortunately going to his own demise. Big shame there for Sikorsky. Down to 24th, will drop to 3rd in the AM categories. Ben Altria goes through on him. So still, Dan McCauley, everything just seems to be going perfect for him. As soon as someone goes for a challenge, somehow it goes against them. So really good job so far for Dan McCauley. As Phil Samways is in the pits, John Roberts, Loynes, Hedgecock for the back roll in the pits as well. But here is going to be Phil Samways. Matthias Pirhanen as well follows him in. This could make things interesting now, because some drivers are going in early. I thought he'd be around the 25 to 30 minute mark, never mind 37.
So we've got this push up the hill, which is going on right now between the likes of Dan McCauley and co as they look to work. You've also got Alexander Davidson eyeing up Arthur Thurtle for position as move is done along the straight. Tom Griggs gets his pass and Alexander Davidson gets his as well on the brakes as he works through turn 5 and doesn't quite have 100% clearance and has just managed it into turn 6. So good passes then all throughout the field at the moment, but the key now is going to be, how do you unlock the end of this race? If you've built yourself a good castle to say this is my gap, how do you hold on in these final stages? For those who do endurance all the time, they're going to be used to an hour and 45 minutes. That's 2 stints when you do an enduro race. For those who aren't as used to it, it's a lot more difficult, and it gets really tough when you're in the middle of a massive scrap like this, which includes the likes of Ben Altria and co. You've got Louis Hesketh in there, Aidan Carter is in the mix, Håkon Ida Lindmo and Franek Sikorsky.
Indeed, and I think you've seen through this race, a few drivers just aren't used to that, you know, the longer format of racing. Some of them are making more mistakes than others. We've seen a few black flags as well for incident points coming through. But then you look at the likes of McFarlane and Davidson and Boomy, who have probably done countless endurance races. They know what they're doing, and they've done a really good job. Of course, Davidson had the issue with the black flag in the pits, but that was a bit of a misdemeanor for him, a small one. But it's a fact he's got back into that car, thought, right, we're 50 seconds back, we need to bring that gap down. It came down to 34 seconds and has made about, I think, 9 positions in the process. That's the sort of driver which you know is going to be able to win championships, when you can put yourself in a bad situation and work your way through it, as what's happened there to Aidan Carter.
He's okay, he's just blinking a bit, and that's not going to be doing him too many favours. He's got to be careful about that, because they do have now the black and orange connection flag, which plays the same way as the mechanical flag. If it's too bad your connection to server is troublesome. And I think Hawk and Idle-Inmo's done very well to get out of the way. Phil Samways having a slide then, exiting the hurry downs, and that's going to be a cost of a place or two out there for him. So he didn't really want to be doing too much there wrong, and ultimately he finds himself the wrong side of the slide. Look down the inside and try and make sure your move is made as Altria and Carter look around Louis Hesketh. There might be pushes about for Ben, hoping to get a move done. Not going to work for the moment, but once more they have the attack to turn 5.
Certainly, as Dan McCauley is into the pit lane from the AM race lead. Carter all over the back now with Louis Hesketh down towards turn number 5, pulls to the inside, looks to get a head onto the grass momentarily as they head onto the brakes. Can Aiden Carter get that move done? Because you can see Hesketh really late onto the brakes. A nice move to the inside, Hesketh a tad wide, and through goes Aiden Carter into P16. Then next on the list will be Ben Altria, looking to get ahead of Louis Hesketh, and then behind is Franek Sikorsky, and that is a battle for category position. So Sikorsky is going to be hoping that Altria can't find that move.
And Ben Altria has, I think, been playing a pretty smart game. He hasn't been standing out head above the parapet. Louis Hesketh's had a great run today, but Franek Sikorsky is trying to recover his way back through. He's trying to say, this is what I'm all about. This is where I can find those places. This is where I can start picking it apart moment by moment, sector by sector, corner by corner, and now on to the run through the Kettle Bottom and heading towards Canada Corner once again. Is there going to be unlocks of overtakes here on this lap? It looks like Hesketh will only lose out to Aiden Carter then, and suddenly Ben Altria now finds himself third in the train, and sometimes that's the most difficult place.
Yeah, certainly, because you've got to be careful of cars ahead and then cars behind. As we continue our way on, Mendonca and Grabowski as well, all into the pit lane, the number 5 and 41 going, as Tom Griggs gets ahead of those two, and then a few other cars heading into the pits from that train. So we head back down towards turn 1, Hesketh and Sikorsky, both in, as they're both part of the AM category. So Ben Altria now trying something different here in this one, of course, just trying to get the better of the two other category drivers.
I've just been keeping an eye on Alexander Davidson's times. He's just done a 2:01.4 out there, which is about 3/10 quicker than anybody else over the course of that last lap. Simply magical in terms of the times he's starting to run with, but it is still with Altria where the focus is, knowing that we've got a couple seconds of gap then between the likes of Joe Newman as Louis Hesketh is down in the lane. We've also got David Mendonca, who has been down in to make a stop. So this opens things up a bit here for Ben Altria, and this is sometimes the blessing when the car in front dives into pits. That's a hold on to it moment for Josh Boot, who then has to go wiggle, 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 as in comes your race leader. The big key is once one car pits, you have a chance to jump up the train and get better tow.
Indeed, and now we've seen the leader in, we'll start to see a few more cars behind heading to the pit lane, as we have Martin Toth as well in, Michael Evdoka, which means Molly Joff takes the race lead there in the 909. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll see Newman and Guthrie into the pits as well as this lap goes on. But yeah, really nice and early for McFarlane, but of course has got that choice of when he wants to pit. He hasn't got to react to anybody else. When he wants to pit, he just does it. He hasn't got to worry about others. And that's the great thing about having such a race lead here so far, as Davidson is in the pits as well. But this is a battle, as we still have Carter looking to hold cars off. And I feel bad for Aiden Carter, because it just seems he's never had a point in the race where he's not defending. He's always got a car right on his rear.
It's tough for Aiden Carter here. He's always been put under pressure, and so he'll be looking around saying, well, how do I get myself out of these pressure situations? Byron Crawford out of the race. Andy Archer now also out of the race too. And Carter up the hill looks good. Drivers now starting to leave pit lane. So Ross McFarlane rejoins the race in 7th position ahead of James Boomey, which I think is a critical factor out there on circuit. But into turn 1, once again, it looks like Aiden Carter is just doing enough to stay. But here comes a look all the way to the inside, covered against Ben Altria, who has to get on the binders quicker, and that will now bring Josh Boot to the party. And who will get the boot as they head themselves down through the sweep?
Of course, and Josh Boot was part of this battle earlier on until he had that contact and got forced off track. He's back here once again and looking to go for some moves as we head down to turn 5. Who's going to go for the send? It's going to be Boot to the inside, looking to get ahead of one, and actually nearly pulled alongside Aiden Carter. But into 15th place goes into 12th place goes Josh Boot. A nice move indeed from him, ahead of Ben Altria. And of course, we'll be looking to close down on Aiden Carter as they make their way through.
Marley Joffe has gone 2 laps longer than Martin Toth, and this is the critical phase of the race. In the race on for second, Martin Toth is having to fight with Tom Griggs at the moment, just in front of this group through the kink, while his tyres get up to temperature. And once they do, it's a case of, can I now find pace to go and work myself back through? Mendonca back in the pits again, so it's a second stop for Davin Mendonca, not what the doctor ordered. But I tell you what is going to be interesting here is the fact that Joe Newman here is starting to lose his ground to William Guthrie. That gap's to a second. Here comes Josh Boot having another surge, and he just can't pick the pocket there of the likes of Aiden Carter. This is tough between 2 pro-ams.
It certainly is, and of course they've got to be careful, because the last thing they want is to come together and lose points, crucially for both of them in their category, as they make their way through. Carter still ahead and will actually bail into the pits here with 29 minutes to go. So Josh Boot now has the charging of Ben Altria behind, and Benny's going to be closing in down towards turn 1, but I don't think it'll be enough to go for an overtake or ascend. They make their way through, and Boot will just still stick in P12 for the time being, as they all make their way through turn 1 and 2 once again. But really good to see our top 6 have all stayed out here, have gone a lot longer than the likes of McFarlane and Boomy. So this will be very, very interesting, as of course Boomy is right behind McFarlane. They're not battling for position because James Boomy still needs to pick once more.
Yep, so James Boomy, of course, has to make that final stop, and where he comes out will be a very interesting race. I reckon he's still on to fight for a top 10 here as James Boomy, but he's going to need a bit of help to try and get there. Alexander Davison, by comparison, will be looking for a top 5, and the gap will come down, especially when you consider who is net leader, Ross McFarlane. So in comes Marley Joffe. Now this becomes a battle of pit crews out there between Joffe and Martin Toth. We know what Toth was able to do. We expect that Marley Joffe can get the jump when it comes to the pits. It's a long old haul down to the 6th to last pit box, as Adam Hedgecock now will see his engine go boom in the pit, as Martin Toth, by comparison, is only making his way now towards Canada Corner, which is the right-hander. Joe Newman and William Guthrie will take control of the lead, with Michael Gray in the stops. Marley at 13 seconds stationary, at 16 seconds stationary. Toth working his way now through the final corner. Don't expect too many fireworks. Off the jacks now they go. Lead will now be taken again net by Ross McFarlane, but that is going to be half a straight lead by Marley Joffe. What brilliant work there to overcut in the stop.
That is an insane pit stop there by Marley Joffe. The gap is 10 seconds between himself and Martin Toth, and you'd be thinking at this point maybe that second place is also done and dusted. Of course, 4 seconds up the road is going to be Ross McFarlane, but he's got a bit of traffic to deal with, hence why he's maybe not putting down the pace we normally see. So we head our way back down to turn 5, but brilliant work there by Marley Joffe, as that is going to be one of the lapped cars. That's going to be P34, Howard Hassan, getting involved as they head down towards turn 5. But of course Howard himself, I think, still needs to pick once more in this race.
Yeah, so you're keeping eyes on drivers who are now a little bit out of sequence, a little bit out of cycle, and I look around at James Boomy, for example. He's just come out behind Ben Bennyworth Ford Company. He's not a million miles off of Arthur Thurtle and Michael Gray, so he'll be certainly eyeing that up. He's had a great second stop, and he might be salvaging a lot more points than we think. Joe Newman taking time at the front of this field and trying to work well with his Atomic Motorsports Ferrari, which is out there in front. Haven't said that too often. Ferrari.
Yeah, I think that's one of maybe 2 or 3 on the grid. We haven't seen many Ferraris at all, and Newman's doing a great job in his Ferraris. Oh, Sikorsky! Sikorsky with a black flag!
That'll be for incident points then, and Franek was skirting on the edge of those, and as he's run off the road somewhere, he will have to come in and serve the penalty for going over the limit. We'll catch a look at it here at turn 1. Has he just overcooked it, or is it maybe turn 3 where it's gone wrong for him, as we got some brilliant scrapping going on in the bottom right corner of your screen. If you just go a little too far, it's trouble. In comes Newman, in comes Vettel, and that's side by side. Absolutely beautiful stuff heading in through the kink and proving that there is some great racing out there each and every place you start looking out there on track. That is what was desperately needed for the likes of Mendonca, Gray, and critically Arthur Thurtle.
Certainly, who's got Michael Gray right behind as they make their way through. And of course, Michael Gray has also just, got himself back into the race. Of course, has had a few mistakes, had a few incidents, but still sits in the top 14 here. So he's doing a nice job in that car. Of course, has got both of his pit stops completed, and we'll be going to the end as we make our way back down to turn 1. Ben Ultra as well is in the pit lane along with Tommy Vadal and Josh Boot as well, as they all continue on. And Michael Gray now up into 10th place. So a nice recovery indeed.
Yeah, so Michael Gray bringing himself back into position with Altria in the stops. It's a question of where Dan McCauley is by comparison to say how that's going to go. The number 21 is just working his way up the front stretch now. So where Ben Altria comes out, he's transferring down the lane, and I think there is going to be clearance. So Dan McCauley, I think, and I mean just here in terms of this, is going to get out ahead of who he needs to at the moment. So Ultra is back with him. Ben Bennyworth here in 13th place. I think is due a pit stop here late along here, as he's just behind James Boomy, who's found a way through. In front of Boomy is the fresh out of the pits Tommy Vettel.
Indeed, so that will mean there's a lot of work here for Boomy, because Tommy's had a lot of pace so far in this race, as William Guthrie goes into the pit lane, which means I don't think that Chris Chatterton will be that far behind in the number 16 car. Currently sits in P2 at the moment. So yes, William Guthrie is in, and it will, of course, will be quite interesting to see where he comes out compared to Joe Newman as they make their way through. Chatterton as well goes into the pits. So very shortly we will see McFarlane retake that race lead, which he's had for pretty much all this race. Molly Joff will jump up into second place with a 7-second gap to Martin Toth, who will jump up into third. That pit stop by Joff was absolutely perfect, and it was the type of thing that we needed, and the type of things, Jake, that we both said earlier on. It will come down to pit stops more than anything for that second and third spot.
Marley saved enough fuel, Martin Toth did not. It was a longer stop, and it proves to be a seismic difference. Toth now just 4 seconds clear of Michael Evdoka out there on circuit, and that will give a lot of food for thought as Chatterton's pit stop done. William Guthrie comes out a couple seconds behind Joe Newman, but critically ahead of Alexander Davidson, who I think is really going to have to work now in the final 22.5 minutes to get that top 5 in the books. By comparison, James Boomy in P12 will be looking at maybe 9th place as his best, which is Arthur Thurtle out there. So there are two very distinct schools of drivers who are trying to gain places to keep gaps in certain places in the championship. It is as tough can be, and speaking of what has been tough out there, it looks like Dan McCauley has lost the place back then to Ben Altria. So Altria then finds himself back into position needed for the AM category lead as they go on with Joe Coffin having made his stop.
Indeed, Coffin will drop back along with Bennyworth, Lee Berridge as well into the pit lane. But yes, that gap between Altria and McCauley only a couple of tenths, so there is still a chance that McCauley can try and take that race win back, as Aidan Carter also closing in, of course, part of the Pro-Am category. So the last thing McCauley wants is a car from a different category getting involved as we make our way through into towards turn 5, and that's a bit wide indeed. That is wide as Ben Altria drops back down to 21st place.
Yeah, and critically, it is through for Dan McCauley, and the AM category lead goes back to the AM championship leader. Will Altria find a way back here at the Hurry Downs? The answer is no, going into the 90-degree left-hander and the long carousel that follows under the Speedfield Bridge. You wait an eternity to get the power down properly.
Indeed, it is a really weird corner because it's so hard to get it, you know, inch perfect through there. And of course, most drivers have done a great job. Others tend to go wide and struggle. And of course, luckily, they've all made it through. And when you go battling side by side, things do get quite tense through the carousel section at turn number 9 as we continue our way on. And of course, still, Altria will be kicking himself, making a slight mistake to allow Macaulay through. And if he kept the pace he had, he probably would have been able to keep ahead of Macaulay for the rest of this race. But one small mistake, and that's one position lost. And crucially, for the race winners here is Michael Gray on the back of Arthur Thurtle, battling for 8th place. Through turn 3 they go. And you can see here, Gray's all over the rear of Arthur Thurtle in the Porsche. Of course, it's Mercedes versus Porsche here in this battle. And you can see already Gray will be looking, will it be the outside, will it be the inside down towards turn 5? Let's see, does he go for the lunge? I think this time around just chooses to sit back.
Tries to work the outside line, doesn't quite get the drive needed, and gets the slowdown penalty for going too wide. Look at this freebie trying to go side by side. Chris Chatterton now trying to get the pickpocket, heading towards the hurry downs, and gets the inside but not the clearance. Now he's going to be on the wrong side of the road here for the next left, but if he can get the clearance needed, he'll have the next corner in favour. He backed out of it, and suddenly Davin Mendonco's a lap down is on the back of this group, and he doesn't want to get himself involved.
Indeed, a nice move from Chatterton into P10 as we continue our way on. And of course, Gray will be really, you know, annoyed now that he's lost all that time to Arthur Thurtle. Of course, it was a move on the cards, a slowdown has cost him all of that, as you can see Ben Altria dropping behind the back of Aidan Carter. And that is the thing that I've said that Ben Altria doesn't want. He doesn't want a car from a different category ahead of him, and it will be Aidan Carter who jumps up into 22nd place as Josh Boots is in the pit lane, or at least it said it was for a moment. I think that was a bit of a timing glitch here as we continue our way on. But of course, Altria will not be happy at all that Aidan Carter has got that move. But looking further ahead, Alexander Davidson has kind of got stuck where he is, was bringing that gap down brilliantly, but now not really bringing that gap down on William Guthrie here.
2:01.9 on that last lap for Alexander Davidson, and 2:02.4 for William Guthrie, so he still took half a second out of it, and it means that gap is 4 seconds as they cross the line. So it will take, at this current rate, 8 laps for Alexander Davidson to go through. 8 laps being about 16.5 minutes, which means he'll get there with about 2 minutes to go and have 1 lap to catch the remaining 2 seconds for Joe Newman. That will be 6th place and 6th place only, whereas I'm looking around at James Boomey doing 2:02.4s, and I would say that he's in range with Gray and Chatterton and Vettel for a top 10 place. So James Boomey here might be the driver of note as we watch those two in front of, and just clipping the grass and the dirt up again, Chris Chatterton and Michael Gray. Tommy Vettel now is the first bastion of defence for these two drivers.
Certainly, as they make their way through. And of course, a nice battle for 8th, 9th and 10th. Of course, Vettel is there in the background, but then of course it is time to make moves for James Boomey. Half a second between Vettel and Boomey as they make their way through, and I don't think it'll be that long before Boomey goes through. Of course, started 7th in this race, dropped down to 40th on the first lap after contact with Anders Marlborough, who unfortunately also was a retiree, and has now moved himself up to 12th. We'll be looking for 11th here on this lap, and potentially higher as the next 17 minutes goes on. Boomey's closing in. He's got a nice run down towards turn 12 at Canada Corner, but is it going to be enough to get a move? Because Vidal's gone to the inside.
Oh, he's let him have it.
Let him through. Yeah, lets him through. No bump at all.
Wow. Now that tells you all you need to know, that drivers will be prioritising finishes in this race with as little battling as possible. James Boomey gets the Ayrton Senna treatment. Yellow helmet, let me through. And he gets a lovely freebie there out of Tommy Vettel, and Tommy should get a favour, or as I like to say, a nice bottle of wine at some point from James Boomey for letting that one go. And as well, lest we forget, they've got Arthur Thurtle only a second and a half forward of Michael Gray. There could be a world where Alexander Davidson only finishes 1 place ahead of James Boomey. That seemed impossible after the first 10 minutes.
It certainly did, and that would be insane scenes indeed. The gap was, what, at one point, 40 positions. Could end up with 1. Insane. A brilliant drive from James Boomey at the moment. Davidson, slight mistake, causing that black flag, has cost him 6 positions here in this, well, potentially 6 positions, because he was in a battle with Ross McFarlane. As we continue our way back down towards turn number 5, the gap between Boomey and Chris Chatterton is 2.6 seconds. I'm sure that will come down very, very quickly here as we make our way through and towards turn number 6, but certainly top 8 could be on the cards. I think 9 is more realistic here though for James Boomey, but of course anything can happen in the final 15 minutes of this race. But of course in the Pro-Ams, the lead is still going to be Joe Newman, P5 overall, ahead of William Guthrie in second, Michael Gray in third, and then for our AM category, the leader is still Dan McCauley. Everything's been thrown at him, but he's still in that leading spot ahead of Ben Altria, and then Jacques Eva is now third in that AM category. Brilliant drive from him as well. Started, I think, down in like 45th or something now, up into 23rd.
Yep, so he's doing a good job here in Jacques Eva. He's dropped back a little bit, but he's found a way to get back up and trying to gain a couple places. John Roberts has gone into the wall, and that finds his day done and dusted out there. What a shame for the gentleman, John. But the biggest thing Alexander Davidson needs right now is that Pro-Am battle for the win to heat up between Joe Newman and William Guthrie. He needs William to actually catch Joe Newman, and then both of them to start fighting amongst each other. And as I say that, your race lead is not sorted for the race win overall either. That gap's just ticked under 4 seconds. Marley Joffe is pushing.
He certainly is. The gap last time out was 3/10 in Marley Joffe's favour, so there's still that chance that McFarlane might not run away with this race lead. It's probably still a little bit far-fetched, but you never know. But of course we can see as well, Newman and Guthrie are closing up that gap to second, and that can bring Davidson into the battle depending on how much these two battle. This is for 19th and 20th. That'll be, I think, is it Lindmo and McCauley, I think, battling there as they head down towards turn number 1. And then behind those is Aidan Carter, keeping Ben Ultra at bay.
Yep, so Ben Altria is a little bit stuck right now with Aidan Carter, and he is the championship leader in the Pro-Am category, and Ben Altria, I think, is being a little bit gate-kept at this moment. Daniel McCauley has every chance to extend that lead even further in category, and it's been looking a bit one-sided. And there go the windscreen wipers, try and get a bit of dirt off the screen as he attacks Håkon Idolindmo for 19th. Now, they don't score by category in terms of points, so you don't get a pro championship where you get pro points and pro-am points and am points. They're all singing from the same hymn sheet, which means every driver of every category has to share their points.
Indeed, and that's what makes things close, because we do get to see some of our Pro-Ams and Ams, potentially, such as Dan McCauley, actually quite high up in the championship overall, which is quite insane to think. And it just shows that even though they're all in different categories, and some are pros and some are amateurs, they're not really that far off when it comes to pace. So, you know, a brilliant job by Dan McCauley. 538 points in total for him, only 300 away from James Boomey, which, you know, isn't that bad at all when you're an Am driver.
No, it's not at all. And when you're saying you've got that level of closeness in terms of battling, you're doing a great job. James Boomey now has his gap at 2 seconds to Chris Chatterton. On that last lap, he was able to take 7/10 of a second out of him. Alexander Davidson able to take another half a second out of William Guthrie. The gap comes down to 2.7 seconds. Guthrie at 8/10 now to Joe Newman. And still, we think that there is still a lot to be decided late on. Any mistake now from Ross McFarlane is going to be pounced on by Marley Joffe here in the late stages of this race. And those final 10 minutes, this is what we call water torture hours out here, Nathan, because every lap feels 4 minutes long, not 2.
Yeah, certainly. For the drivers, this will be the longest 12 minutes of their racing careers, especially if you're Ross McFarlane, because you've always got in the back of your mind, am I going to make a mistake? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And once that 12 minutes is gone, it's like, phew, you know, we've took the race win, or we took whatever position it was. Yeah, it is a really long point, and this is where you really get to see the greatest from, you know, good drivers, I suppose we could say, because some drivers here will crumble under that pressure, and I'm sure we're going to see that in the next 10 minutes, and some of them thrive under the pressure, and somebody who's been under pressure all race is Arthur Thurtle. He has not caught a break. Same goes for Aidan Carter. Those two are just defending. They've never had to attack. They've just had to defend. And Michael Gray is on the attack. He's on the push, looking to jump up to 8th place. And that is what can bring James Boomy back into this battle along with Chris Chatterton.
No moves then being shown at Canada corner. Michael Gray takes a little bit of a wider line in. Boomy sidles up to the back of Chris Chatterton in the Nomad machine, who has done a great job from 15th to get into that top 10. But I think James Boomy is saying, I've got every intention of finding a way through and managing these passes. Every place now is going to have to be fought for with absolutely everything you've got, and along the main straights they go. Arthur Thurtle then sees that Michael Gray wants turn 1, and so too does James Boomy. Pull out there in the back a shot. Down the inside of Chris Chatterton, steals his apex and says top 10, you betcha.
What a move from James Boomy up into 10th place, as we do see Michael Gray ahead of Arthur Thurtle. A position has been made. They're still side by side down to turn number 5.
Look at that, they were bagging paddles as they are going under the Sargento Bridge. Now you're starting to see what racing late on in these endurances means. Thurtle holding on the outside. Gray's got command of the apex, and he's got the next left-hander as well to say it's his, and he gets his pass.
He does indeed. A great move there by Michael Gray. Has been looking for that all race long, and finally, with 9 minutes to go, gets that move complete. Thurtle sticks behind in 9th place, but James Boomy is next to enter the scene, and I'm sure it's not going to take him long to try and make a move on Thurtle and Gray, because he's got some immense pace so far in that Mustang as they make their way through in towards the carousel. And Boomy will be hunting down a top 8. I think anything above that is out of play, but 8th place for him is probably going to be certain. And the fact he'll only be finishing 1 position behind Davidson, nobody would have been thinking that at the start of this race.
But remember, Alexander Davidson is chasing down the Pro-Am battle for the race win. So he's got the 9.97 and the 36 in sight. It was under 2 seconds, and look at that. It's currently 1 second on the timing tower at the moment as they climb the hill. So while James Boomy can pick up 2, so too can the likes of Alexander Davidson. A bit of side-by-side further back. That's Dennis Grabowski trying to get down the inside of Phil Samways for position. That's for plus 30 today for Dennis Grabowski.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant drive. Has had to make the positions all the way through. Has even been caught into contact a couple of times, but either way, has fought through it all and sits in 14th after starting right near the back of the field. What a race for Dennis Grabowski. Of course, has got Sam Ways behind and Griggs, but he's certainly not going to come under pressure from those guys at the moment. But I'm looking further ahead. That gap between Guthrie and Davidson is down to a second.
It's certainly close, and remember, James Boomy's all over the back of Arthur Thurtle as Samways loses out the place. Another one goes a-begging, but James Boomy's the story now, and will Arthur Thurtle move for a frame car behind him? They're not direct teammates in this championship. They are free to battle amongst each other, but will there be a sense of I can get a bit more as we find ourselves in the twilight zone right now in this race? The in-sim time ticking over 6:30 in the evening. This is where it all comes down to championship points. Yes, we're still in the first half of the season, but these are critical moments.
Certainly is, and look at that gap between the race leaders, 3.3 seconds, and once again it was more time being taken out last lap from Marley Joff. Took two tenths out of Ross McFarlane last time, and that gap is constantly falling down as that's off the track for Arthur Thurtle. Through goes James Boomy into 9th place, and now he's only a second away from finishing 1 place behind Alexander Davidson, but Davidson himself 2 tenths behind the back of William Guthrie.
And how much did running wide there force James Boomy to lightly lift to allow Michael Gray a tiny reprieve? But up the hill, they now have to start wiggling about. The Serpentines in full force. Alexander Davidson's going to have to go the long way around if he wants this move on William Guthrie. And how wise is William? He lifts out of it, lets it go, because he knows he can use Alexander Davidson as a pick to get by the Ferrari of Joe Newman.
Indeed, and now it's time for Davidson to go for one more move to try and take a top 5 after getting a black flag in the pit lane. Joe Newman 6/10 ahead. It won't be down towards turn 5, but it could be down to turn 5 next time around. 6 minutes to go, not long left in this race as they make their way to the next braking zone. Boomy and Gray are separated by 1.1 second at the moment, and I'm sure that gap as well is going to start falling down, as that's going to be Grabowski battling with Tom Griggs for 14th place, and back through goes Grabowski, gets a nice move ahead of Griggs and still holds on to 30 positions made in this race.
Griggsy's doing what he can in the 908, but Dennis Grabowski, a former driver at the Pure Racing team, and I remember a time when that Pure Racing team got bought out by a certain Team Redline once upon a time. And now on the brakes, figure out a line, why don't you? Griggs trying the long way around, isn't going to find it on Dennis like that. He's going to have to be a little bit more choice about the way he goes and gets that place. Go back to Alexander Davidson. He has caught now Joe Newman, and he'll have a look to the kettle bottoms to get his pass, and you know what? He's only gone and done it. Easy pickings for Alexander Davidson. He's back in a top 5 position.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant once again by Alexander Davidson. Last lap he was in P7. Next lap, he's into the top 5 and will be, not closing down that much on Michael Evdoka, but he might bring that gap down by a second or two before the end of this race, and that is what he needed, because Boom is still in 9th place. He could potentially get a P8, but that still helps Alexander Davidson up into P5. And yet again, Newman didn't even bother going for it or trying to defend it. He let Alexander Davidson through. Back down towards turn 1 we go. A lapped car in the midst behind, but they all make it through. And of course, the battle for the Pro-Am lead is still going to be there. Newman and Guthrie. 3/10 separates into turn 3. Can Guthrie go for a move down to turn 5? He's all over the rear of the Ferrari.
I think this is big for William Guthrie and what he wants to get out of Pro-Am. Joe Newman has been Hollywood in the way he's been throwing them up the inside on the brakes. That Ferrari's been able to stand on it better than the Anthill Mob ever could. And again on the brakes, he proves that he's got great prowess there. William Guthrie's going to have to use pure grunt and power to go through. Howard Hassan hits the limit and he can't do much more. James Boomy right now is forcing Michael Gray quick, only 2/10 over that last section. And Marley Joffe here, I think, is running out of time as well here. Needs a big mistake out of Ross McFarlane as the lights are on for almost everyone.
Certainly, but I think there'll be pressure here on McFarlane because he knows he's got to put some more pace down. Last time, however, set his fastest lap of the race, a 201.744. So has still got some pace, but wasn't really showing it through the course of this race. Has just been consistent and kept a nice gap. But of course, as soon as it starts to come down, he starts to put down that pace. As we continue our way on, Newman still ahead of William Guthrie. That gap down to a couple of tenths. It won't be enough this time around for Guthrie to make a move, so he's going to have to go for it down towards turn 5 next lap, because we've seen on every occasion so far this race, it always seems turn 5 is the hot spot.
It is the prime place to get a move done, and Joe Newman knows it better than anybody else. William Guthrie's been happily sitting back saying, what do I need to do to close this down? They will have 2 laps of racing to figure out whether it's going to be Newman or Guthrie here for Pro-Am. And look at this, it's so cheeky from Joe Newman. He's trying to shake every time he can to get away from William Guthrie into turn 1. Look at that gap now, down to just a car length through the middle.
And into turn 3 they go once again. And is this going to be the chance that William Guthrie is going to take? Through turn 3 they go. It's a nice long straight down to turn 5. A bit of a mistake from Newman. Weaves and weaves again. He's trying to keep William Guthrie behind. That slipstream will help the Mustang down towards turn number 5. The Ferrari is trying to hold on to that P6 space, and of course the AM category win. Is there going to be a send from Guthrie on this occasion? No. Sits back for now. He knows he's not going to pull alongside, so he chooses just to stay behind the back of the Ferrari and keep applying pressure onto Joe Newman.
Pro-Am is proving perfect at the moment for a grandstand finish here in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And keep an eye on Michael Gray, who's holding himself steady on the bottom of your screen behind. This is Tommy Vedel, Chris Chatterton and Arthur Thurtle. That's the scrap for 10th overall at the moment, and those three will have something to figure about. We don't have enough cameras to keep up with all the amazing racing that is going on, and we are almost there at the end.
We certainly are, and we continue on. Has Guthrie got anything in the tank to make that move ahead of Joe Newman as they head their way through the kink down towards Canada Corner? Is there going to be a move on the cards? Because Guthrie is the closest he's been through this section. But I don't think it's enough for a move here unless he goes for a late send.
No, he was on the brakes early. The last lap of the race starts. 2.5 seconds for Ross McFarlane, who has been timing this final run pretty much to perfection. That gap has been eaten and eaten and eaten. He's got a couple bits of lap traffic at the front. As we see him on the bottom of your screen, he's got Louis Hesketh to get through, and I think he's safe after that once he goes through. At the top, climbing the hill, is Joe Newman and William Guthrie trying to prove what they've got. James Boomey as well is right on the back of Michael Gray on the final lap. That could be huge for 8th place as well. So there is too many places to look. There's James Boomey now on the top of your screen, proving that scrap's there, and as well, that race on for 10th position overall, which is there on the bottom of your screen. It continues on. Barney up there in the flags tower, waving that white flag lap over for everybody. So now hold on to your horses. Outside line looking then for Chris Chatterton in towards turn number 1. He's not going to quite get there. It's like NFL red zone here on the final lap. Guthrie's not got enough going into turn 5 to get it done on Joe Newman. He'll have to do it somewhere else. Will there be something for James Boomey on the top of your screen heading into this section to say, I can find this pass in the latest of late places? Michael Gray late on the brakes. Here comes James. He's outdone himself. Oh, Michael Gray's outdone himself. Unbelievable stuff, as that is just pure aura from James Boomey to get his pass. He knew he needed that. He was desperate for it. He's got it. Thurtle still holds his place. Joe Newman is still holding his place. But now you've got to go to the final corner. Ross McFarlane just managing the gap. The only one who could not make a mistake out of the championship leaders. A must win is a win for McFarlane as he takes it at Elkhart Lake. Look at this for Pro-Am. Joe Newman, here comes Guthrie to the outside, and he can't quite get it done at Canada Corner. This one here, Nathan, could come to a drag race.
It certainly could do. Through into the final couple of corners, the final opportunity for William Guthrie to go for that P6 spot as they head through into the final corner. Newman is all over the road. Can Guthrie get that position? Out to the final corner, there you go. And I don't think it's enough on this occasion for William Guthrie, but it's Joe Newman who takes a win for the Pro-Am category, P6 overall, and William Guthrie gave him a brilliant race, and one more lap, there was possibly a chance.
A critical race as well for James Boomey, who will take 8th over the line. What a save, and we go all the way back here to P19. No, 19 for Dan McCauley, who will know that after Aiden Carter has proven to be the toughest cookie in the box to try and get by, Ben Altry has had nothing to try and find that pass, and he knows that with the gap between him, Hawker Ida Lindmer as well, Dan McCauley is walking towards this AM category title without any form of pressure at all. Series 1 racing. How about P1 racing for car 21 in AM category? Dan McCauley. It's 2 Scots winning 2 categories.
Indeed, a great race for Dan McCauley. Absolutely spotless for the AM winner, and of course in the championship already with a 71-point lead. It's going to go up even more between himself and Ben Altria, and of course taking the 2 wins last time out in Portimao makes it 3 on the bounce.
It's big in terms of finding results, and the last of your drivers then running through. Only 24 will make it through on the leading lap here today, but what a day here in your first of 2 endurance races of this season. It is Ross McFarlane, who did nothing wrong all day to pick up the win, but what a great effort in that final stint by Marley Joffe for Effect Simulations, the number 909, clawing a 7-second gap back down to just under 2 by the time they reached the line. Martin Toth would finish 3rd with Michael Evdoka 4th, and what difference would 35 seconds speeding on the lane make for Alexander Davidson? That is a big missed opportunity today in 5th. Joe Newman will take your AM category, your Pro-Am category victory in 6th place for Atomic Esports, ahead of William Guthrie, with James Boomy, who was 40th at the end of the opening lap, moving his way back to P8 by the time this race was done. Michael Gray would have the misfortune of outbraking himself at turn 5, with Arthur Thurtle rounding out your top 10. You look down the field, Chris Chatterton and Tommy Vettel fighting hard for that top 10, find themselves on the outside looking in, with Matthias Pirhinen 13th and Tom Griggs in 14th place. Give some credit as well to Dennis Grabowski. Couldn't qualify the car due to penalty last time out, so from 44th to 15th, that is a great result of 29 places gained. Phil Samways and Adam Watson are 16th and 17th, ahead of Josh Boot, then with Daniel McCauley, your AM category winner, there in 19th, with Håkon Ida Lindmo making up your top 20 for Nomad. Aidan Carter continues on his work to try and keep himself in play in Pro-Am, 21st only, with Ben Altria in 22nd, ahead of Jacques Eva. Joe Coffin and Louis Hesketh 24th and 25th, ahead of Ben Bennyworth and Taylor Lane, who had a tough day at the office, 1 lap down. Franek Sikorsky, with a penalty for incidents, would drop back to 28, ahead of Jesse Payne-Wilkins and Lee Berridge for Boosthead Motorsports, making up your top 30. Benjamin Gregory would be 31st, ahead of Paul Smith, a respectable 32nd for him, continuing to pile on the points, ahead of Howard Hassan in 33rd. 3 laps down and finishing would be Colin Sansom, and then your retirees, including David Mendonca for Solpec Precision, the DX Droids car of Oriol Duran running into troubles, as well as Andy Archer, Byron Crawford, the Gentleman John Roberts and Brian Loynes, and then leading over for the final page, Adam Hedgecock, Jack Osborne, Joey Petrie, Drew Fletcher, Anders Myra, who critically had that incident with the likes of that being your championship leader overall in James Boomy, Elliot Roberts, and then Eric Muxka finding issues on the opening laps worth of racing. But Nathan, that goes down as a really hard-fought race in so many different ways. The championship won't have that much movement, but that race certainly did.
Oh, it did. It was brilliant. I mean, when you go into an endurance race, which is around, between an hour and 2 hours long, you think, there'll be a lot of battling, but there'll be points where it goes dull and where everyone settles in. But that wasn't the case. Wherever we was watching today, there was always a battle, always someone fighting for position, which is what makes it even better when we have our different categories, because they're also always battling for their spots in the championship. So it was a really good race, enjoyable to be back here. And, for 1 of 2 endurance races, the next one will be at Spa, and that will be interesting as well. I can't wait for that one either.
Well, every driver knows that it is really, really tough when you get to racing at the circuit, at Indianapolis Motor Speedway first and foremost before we reach Spa. That'll be coming along with that endurance later on in the season. But when they get back to something a little bit more regular here in 7 days' time, Nathan, Indianapolis, we've had an Indy 6 hour to get these drivers understanding what makes this circuit difficult. This one, I think, is going to be more in favor of those cars that don't have the top speed advantage. I'm looking at those Ferraris, I'm looking at those Porsches, I'm looking at the Aston Martins going, they've got a really good chance of getting some good points when they come to race here in 7 days.
Yeah, certainly. Indy is a technical track. It's not an easy one, and I think also it will be more of our experienced drivers that will benefit here more than anything. So the pros, the Pro-Ams and the AMs are probably going to have a bit more of a gap used to what they normally have. But either way, it will be a really fun one. Of course, it is once again one of our 2-rain races, so we have 2 races at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So if you make a mistake in race 1, you can always come back again for race number 2.
In a day where it was up, down and all around, you are never judged on how good you are on your best day. You are always judged on how good you are on your worst. From being down in the pack in 40th back up to 8th place from a drive-through penalty, from a holder penalty, in the lane, all the way to 5th place. It's a day of what might have been for two of the very best on the top of the championship. But there's one constant out there that defines this one for pro category as we set our sights on 16th Street and Georgetown Road. Ross McFarlane is not going to be a bystander third in the championship. He closes the gap on the top two with a big win here today, and he says, I am chasing you all down.